across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, it's the start of another week and there's a lot politically around, in general, especially those businesses that are closing because of the Employment Rights Act. 160,000 of them, worse than in COVID. Can this government actually get businesses opening? Can they get growth? Maybe you've lost your job, maybe you're someone who's an entrepreneur or runs a small business and you've had to lay people off, or maybe you've thought about opening another business. Let me know your thoughts, I'd love to speak to you. 0344 499 1000. We're talking about the boats plan that Reform UK have as well. They say send in the Navy. We've heard that before from them, but there's more detail here. But it's been criticised by various people, including a former naval officer. We'll speak to Isabel Oakeshott about that. And is it all just a big distraction away from Nigel Farage's £5 million donation, which he hasn't said too much about, although in fairness to him, he did a big press conference this morning. We'll hear what the Prime Minister has to say about the boats too. He was in Dover yesterday. Also, could there be a deal between Restore Britain and Reform UK? That's something that is on the cards, but already there's a war of words with Rupert Lowe accusing Nigel Farage of lying. We'll talk all about that as well. There's so much more too. We'll talk about early release leading to patrol cuts because Ian Aitchison, who is one of the leading voices on prisons in this country, former prison governor himself, and he's written all sorts of reviews from the Ministry of Justice and others. He'll be live in the studio a little bit later on. You're going to want to hear what he has to say. Also, benefit claimants offering discounts on holidays and, get this, sex toys. Yes, really. We're going to talk to James Hodgkinson about that, and I, for one, that will be a slightly different conversation to what we usually have with James Hodgkinson, a regular contributor to the programme. Who's to blame for the youth worklessness crisis as well? The Education Secretary says, as one of her predecessors, Michael Gove, will get to the bottom of that as well, and will reflect on the extraordinary life of Rod Liddle, a brilliant broadcaster and writer who I knew a little bit. He was always incredibly kind and generous and good fun as well. There have been many tributes paid by so many people. He was a Sun columnist, he was a Sunday Times columnist, he was a presenter on Times Radio. In fact, sometimes I fill in on Times Radio and he's taking over from me, and I couldn't kind of believe that, you know, the chair I was vacating, Rod Liddle was actually coming into to do his excellent show. Sadly, he has left us, and we'll be paying tribute to him. And the thing was, he had so many different friendships, including across the political divide, and a surprising voice is going to join us a little bit later on to talk about how Rod Liddle was friends with people from across the political divide, more in common, and of course disagreeing without being disagreeable. Loads to discuss on this programme, which is where we do exactly that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a WhatsApp voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss, loads of time to do it too, so please do pick up the phone, give me a call, let me know your thoughts here on Talk. Stay with us. Well, let's go directly to Isabel Oakeshott. She is the international editor of this station. Isabel, it's great to talk to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Peter. Quite a busy news day, one way or another.
Certainly is. Big press conference from Nigel Farage earlier. Let's hear what he had to say about the boats and what his plan is.
There is an argument doing the rounds in the media that it's OK. It's fine. The numbers are 40% lower than they were this time last year. But it only takes one or two Iranian terrorists to come into Britain and commit a mass atrocity for this to be a disaster. The Australians faced all of these problems many years ago. They tried offshore processing. They tried a number of things, and in the end what worked was towing the boats back to Indonesia. And since then, hardly a boat has landed in Australia. I am entirely confident that under a Reform government, within a fortnight, there would be no more boats.
And this is a major news story, and I want to hear from Isabel, her view, in just a second. For lots of reasons, of course, it's ongoing. The Home Office would say, actually, the number of boats arriving has gone down, but the boats have not been stopped, the gangs have not been smashed. Our current Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, was in Dover yesterday. This is what he said.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years, people crossing. So clearly progress is being made, but we're not complacent. It's why I am here. So we're just going to be relentless. People want to see this issue addressed. I heard that on the doorsteps in Makerfield, but we also need to build a system that offers safe routes for people as well, because that also takes away the selling point of the gangs.
Isabel, the Prime Minister is factually wrong. They are not down 50%. 42.9% is not 50%, and we heard the policy outlined by Nigel Farage today. What do you make of it all?
Well, why is Andy Burnham doing this from Dover? Why doesn't he go to France, where the problem is? It wouldn't take a lot, and it would actually be really, really good for him, PR-wise, if he went over to France and had a proper showdown with the French. Now, the French can and do stop the boats. This may be news to people because they don't do it nearly enough, but they do actually do this, but they only do it when it suits them. And in the UK, as the UK government, Andy Burnham as the head of that, needs to make it suit them more often. And then there wouldn't be an issue with the UK having to stop the boats, because the French would be stopping them getting off on those launches in the first place. So I think that it would have been a lot more impressive and meaningful for Andy Burnham actually to go to Calais or to go to Dunkirk. I mean, why doesn't he go to the migrant camps and actually see how it is there? You know, I was saying this on Kev's show earlier. Why doesn't Andy Burnham spend a night in one of those camps in Dunkirk? Well, the answer to that is because it's too damn dangerous. It's really, really dangerous. But I'd love him to see what is happening just across the channel from us and get a real sense, not just from reading about it, of the kind of people coming our way. Now, most of the people coming our way are pretty desperate people and probably not bad people at all. You know, there are women and children trying to get over, but I'm afraid that the majority of them, I think I'm safe to say this, having spent months researching what's really going on there, the majority of them barely speak a word of English. You know, they are struggling to string one sentence together about where they're from and why they're coming to the UK. This is highly controlled, this whole thing, by multinational people trafficking gangs, and it's very, very dangerous. And it's not a human or kind thing to do to allow this to continue. The reason, as we're showing footage just now of overcrowded boats, the reason those are so heavily dominated by men, young men, is because it's a very physically challenging thing just to even get on board of the boats. So yes, the numbers are down a bit. They're down significantly. Let's give a bit of credit for that. But even one boatload of people, we've no idea who they are, and they're very unlikely to be net contributors to our economy, is a serious matter. There's a boat on its way as we speak, Peter. I know there's a boat on its way across the channel, and there will be plenty more.
Although with the reform plan, the former Royal Naval Commander Tom Sharp has said a £1 billion warship that's configured for anti-air warfare or anti-submarine warfare, which are both threats to the UK, is not best used ferrying people around. You're better off using an actual ferry. And Richard in Ayrshire says, why is Nigel going on about Iranian terrorists possibly coming in and totally ignoring the Afghan ones and his mates Jenrick and Braverman brought in, says Richard. I wonder what you make of those two comments.
Well, look, you know, whenever somebody who is not in the armed forces makes an informed comment about how the armed forces could do something, you're always going to get, you know, retired Captain so-and-so saying, oh, you know, this is not how you do it, you know.
Do they not know a bit more, though, after a lifetime in the military than Nigel Farage?
I mean, they're all experts, aren't they? And Nigel Farage would not have put forward that proposal without talking to other people, either currently in the military, currently in the Navy or formerly in the Navy. So, it's so depressingly predictable that you're going to have journalists trying to find some or other retired naval commander to say, or lower ranking, to say this is a bad idea, it should be done differently. That's so easy. It's just a kind of lazy bit of journalism to come up with those angles. The question is, how do we stop this happening? Is carrying on like we're going to be ultimately going to lead to the elimination of these crossings? Highly unlikely. My own view is absolutely boats should be turned back, but I think we should start with the French because that's where they leave from, and it's an awful lot easier to stop them leaving in the first place than it is to turn them back.
Yes.
But I happen to agree with Nigel. Of course, it's logistically possible to turn them back. We can argue about what kind of vessels or man/woman power is needed to do that.
Yes.
But of course, it's not beyond the realms of our armed forces capability.
I just want to play another couple of clips from that, one from that press conference and one from Rupert Lowe, because there is this discussion about whether there could be some sort of deal between Reform UK and Restore Britain. We know that in the Manchester mayoral by-election, for example, Reform UK came second, a not particularly good second. It could have been better if it were not for Reform UK running a candidate. There have been a number of by-elections where things have been a bit scratchy for Reform UK. Let's have a look at what Nigel Farage said today about this potential deal.
You could see a situation where Restore, without the hope of winning anything outside Great Yarmouth, I mean literally without a hope of winning a single seat in the country, could do us great harm. And I think online you will see a lot of Restore potential voters now beginning to worry about the impact that might have. So look, I'll finalise that by saying if it was the offer of a deal, it came in a very unusual way. I have responded to it potentially, with an open mind, as I would.
Let's hear what Rupert Lowe had to say. This was before Nigel Farage was speaking this morning. Rupert Lowe.
So Nigel, my message is simple. If you are prepared to work together around serious policies, serious reform, and serious government, then so are we. Not because it's politically convenient for Restore Britain, not because it's personally easy, but millions and millions of British people deserve a patriotic government that puts our national interest before any personal differences that you and I may have.
Do you think a deal is likely? We've had a discussion already from Rupert Lowe saying that Nigel Farage has not particularly told the truth about what was said. Apparently he said will call later and then didn't. I mean, that seems to be reasonably minor, but there's clearly no love lost between these two.
I mean, we'll call later. What does later mean? Does it have to mean, in Rupert Lowe's view, does that have to mean in the next half hour? I mean, later could be next week, couldn't it?
Good
I know
point.
we all imagine it to be, sometime this evening or sometime today. But it seems to me that Rupert Lowe, in characteristic style, has thrown his toys out of the pram before the day is out. I think it's very unfortunate to perform those theatrics and then hope that there's mass applause from the audience and then not be acting really in good faith at all with the other character that you're supposedly going to be performing with, that being Nigel Farage. I think that Rupert Lowe was never remotely serious about this. I don't know why he needed that sort of ridiculous piano music in the background as he made his offer. This was all about presentation. I do think that he's done very well to get as far as he has. It's very hard to build a new party from nothing, but I think that he may be realising just how difficult it is to take it to the next level. And I think also perhaps his relationship with some of his Tory contacts, with whom he is thought by very well-placed sources to be liaising, may be perhaps foundering a bit. So he's possibly feeling a little bit vulnerable himself.
What about Farage? How vulnerable do you think he's feeling, especially with this media scrutiny still coming? Lots of questions today about the £5 million and why he hasn't done more press conferences and so on and so on. He is perhaps feeling the pressure. What do you think?
I actually thought, just looking at him now, I thought he looked a lot better. I thought he looked really well rested. I think he's had a bit of time in the sun. I don't know where he's been, but he looks really well. He has got to win Clacton and win it well. This is a by-election that he called. It would be pretty embarrassing if he doesn't get a really good result, and I'm sure he is going to get a really good result. But until he's done that, he's necessarily quite thinly spread, because he's not taking that for granted. He could just make it as if it's some kind of symbolic thing and not really bother, but he is actually campaigning pretty much all day, every day. And I think it would be good to get that out of the way, and he will look forwards to the autumn, which is the beginning of the new political season. Reform's got its conference quite early. It's the first one by far, so they will be hoping first mover advantage at the beginning of September. Sure. A bit of a reset. It's not been an easy time. I think it would be pretty silly to pretend otherwise.
Certainly. Isabel, thank you. This is Isabel Oakeshott there, the international editor of Talk. And you will note, perhaps, that there has been a development regarding a parliamentary standards inquiry into Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform UK. Isabel, as we know, is Richard Tice's fiancée, and I'm deliberately not asking her about that for obvious reasons. However, we have asked Richard Tice about that particular issue earlier on today. So let's just play a clip from Mark Dolan's discussion with Richard Tice about that.
It's really important to understand, I went to Israel September last year when sadly the hostages were still being held in Gaza, and that was my first visit to Israel. I didn't need to declare it. It was a debate about UK democracy. This is an anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli organisation that's trying to smear and discredit me, and I'm not having it.
Richard Tice speaking to Mark Dolan earlier. We'll go to the debate desk in a second, and thank you for all your messages as well, actually, and including from Penny. He says, I just don't know how stupid this country can get. I think Nigel Farage is our only hope, and his speech this morning was excellent. Why have we got a navy if not to protect us? Once we have more migrants than us and our culture is totally gone, it will be far too late. We won't be the UK anymore. We're getting close to it now. And Alex in Cardiff says, I'm sorry Farage is in la-la land if he thinks he can enact it in 12 days, knowing how Parliament works. It sounds great, but honestly can't see it. Andy Burnham is deluded too. It's summer recess. He'll have the backbenchers to deal with on certain policies when the summer's over. I wouldn't be surprised by next summer if he's deposed for another leader, perhaps Wes Streeting or somebody, but no depth to either Reform or Labour's policies. I wonder what you make of that. 0344 499 1000. We'll go to the debate desk in a second. Just before we do, and we'll hear the candidates for Clacton too, because we are in an election period, I just want to say a huge thanks to Paul, the black cabbie. I don't often take black cabs, but I did last Friday, and Paul was brilliant. I had a lovely chat, and I know he listens to Talk in his cab as he's ferrying people around London. So I just want to say hello and thank you to Paul, who brought me home on Friday. I needed to get home as quickly as possible, so I'm afraid the underground wasn't an option. There's a breaking story in the Telegraph as well about an Afghan migrant arrested over an Athens suitcase murder. He's a Christian aid worker. We'll talk about that in a second or two when we go to the debate desk with Joe and with Sean. In the meantime, here's the candidate read. See you in a second.
So the full list of candidates for the Clacton by-election: Joseph 77, the Independent; Adam Akatip, the Forward Party; Count Binface, the Count Binface Party; Nick the Incredible Flying Brick, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Tony Kane's an independent. Woke Trump Kazi is an independent. William Stewart James Clouston is the Social Democratic Party candidate. Rhys Cowan, an independent. Glenn Charles Cummings, an independent. Martin Davis, the Freedom Alliance Real People, Real Alternative. Andy Earlam's an independent. Nigel Farage, the Reform UK Party. Atiye Fards, an independent. Lawrence Fox for the Reclaim Party. Tony Francis is an independent. Robin Green, an independent. Abby Hookway, an independent. Howling Lord Hope, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party. Stephen Richard Ingram is an independent, as is Amy Morris. Derek Norbert Morris is an independent. Michael Noel O'Keefe, an independent. Martin O'Brien, an independent. Nick Pellis, an independent. And Ketanar Kumar Pipiaya is the UK Voice Safer and Stronger UK Party. Daniel Pocock's an independent. James Ransley, the Consensus Party candidate. Jerry Smith is an independent. Kai Stevens for the British Democrats. John Stevens for rejoin the EU. Baron von Thunderclap for the Official Monster Raving Loony Party. Pamela Walford is an independent. Marcus White, Everyone is God Party. And Mark Wilkinson for the Independents.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Martin, who says, why don't you rebrand yourself as Radio Farage? One Rupert Lowe is worth 100 million Reformite is getting stomach churning. I don't think we are necessarily Reform FM. I think we hold the Reform UK politicians to the same standards as everybody else, but you're very much entitled to your opinion. Danny says, great show as always. I actually think Rupert Lowe is genuine. We can all see the decline and degradation in Britain. We can all see mass immigration destroying the fabric of Britain. I genuinely do believe that Nigel, Rupert and Ben Habib all want the same outcome at the next election. Many feel it's our last chance to save Britain. And Lorraine says, what were people expecting from Rupert Lowe? Decency, honesty and trustworthiness. People are gullible. His party plays games. We just need to see the appalling tactics employed in Makerfield and the abuse online, which is nothing short of vile. When you make demands that include rejecting those who made momentous career decisions to leave the previous parties to support reform, it is not an offer, it's a ransom note. You don't deal with blackmailers. Lowe has only ever been in this game for himself and nothing else. And just to be absolutely clear, there's no suggestion that Rupert Lowe is corrupt or a blackmailer in any way. I think Lorraine is talking about people online there. I just want to be absolutely clear on that. We'll get to that in just a second. I just want to give you something that's breaking in the Telegraph. This is an Afghan migrant arrested over Athens suitcase murder. Is Christian aid worker. Champion boxer held by Greek police is said to have admitted to dumping the woman's body in an abandoned building. This is a very strange and disturbing story. An Afghan national, the paper reports, arrested on suspicion of murdering a British woman in Athens and disposing of her remains in a suitcase, is a champion boxer who co-ran a refugee charity. Sharif Ahmadzai, who's 26, has been detained by Greek police for allegedly killing Elizabeth Jane Ross, a 38-year-old charity volunteer, and using her bank card to withdraw thousands of euros. Mr Ahmadzai is said to have admitted to dumping Ms Ross's body inside an abandoned building and sending text messages from her phone to convince relatives she was alive. Lots more, of course, I'm sure on that as things go on. But I want to talk about Nigel Farage, not because we are Farage FM, it must be said, but because he is the man of the moment when it comes to his big press conference earlier today. I just want to play you what he said, what his plan is, and then we'll go to the debate desk and get some reaction. So this is what Nigel Farage said this morning in central London at a Reform UK press conference.
There is an argument doing the rounds in the media that it's okay. It's fine. The numbers are 40% lower than they were this time last year. But it only takes one or two Iranian terrorists to come into Britain and commit a mass atrocity for this to be a disaster. The Australians faced all of these problems many years ago. They tried offshore processing. They tried a number of things, and in the end what worked was towing the boats back to Indonesia. And since then, hardly a boat has landed in Australia. I am entirely confident that under a Reform government, within a fortnight, there would be no more boats.
Andy Burnham, the Prime Minister, was in Dover yesterday. He says he wants to be relentless to tackle the problem. This is what the Prime Minister said.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years, people crossing. So clearly progress is being made, but we're not complacent. It's why I am here. So we're just going to be relentless. People want to see this issue addressed. I heard that on the doorsteps in Makerfield, but we also need to build a system that offers safe routes for people as well, because that also takes away the selling point of the gangs.
So the boats haven't been stopped, the gangs haven't been smashed. So is Andy Burnham the man to fix it, or would you rather have Nigel Farage? Whatever you think. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to the debate desk. I'm delighted Joe Wheeler is here, broadcaster and meteorologist. Perhaps more of that in a moment because we're in heat wave number 4. And Sean Hickey is with us. He's the head of content at Politics. Joe, great to see you both. You doing well?
Yeah, very good, thanks.
Excellent. What do you make of the Farage boats plan, Sean?
Well, Labour have been saying that it's a rehashed version of what they've been coming up with before, which is objectively true. I mean, you're talking about a party that 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when it was the Brexit party, talking about wave machines, also stealing that from the Conservatives, and now coming up with a policy that, frankly, when you think about the policy of using the Royal Navy to bring people back to France, you're putting Britain's shores at risk by using is something that should be for
they would argue it's the opposite. They would argue it's Border Force and the Navy doing the job.
But I mean, it takes a lot of time to station the Royal Navy warships in the Channel in the first place, and to be having them going to and from France rather than ready to be deployed at a moment's notice.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because the retired Royal Naval Commander Tom Sharp was speaking to the BBC earlier today and said £1 billion warship that's configured for anti-air warfare, anti-submarine warfare, which are both threats to the UK, is not best used ferrying people around. You'd be better off using an actual ferry. What do you think, Joe?
I agree entirely.
Okay.
To use military warships, I mean, assuming they're not in the garage at the moment being fixed, is just performative. It's all for the visuals. What Farage said just a few minutes ago was basically the Australians tried just towing the boats back to Indonesia and everything stopped. Now, if it's that simple, why hasn't it happened? You know, somebody came to me a while back with an idea of a way of stopping the boats, which was simply to put out a boat, fly drones off it, find out where the dinghies are, yeah, and then send out fast ribs. Sorry, that's very, very simple. Turn them around. He understood the details of SOLAS, Save Our Lives at Sea. He understood independent waters and whatever, and said this can be done. It is really quite simple. But that piece you were talking about, it's likely the French will turn around and say we don't want them back. But the thing is, we're paying them an awful lot of money to stop the boats, and they're not stopping them either.
But Reform UK will say, it doesn't matter what the French say, we're going to do this. And Nigel Farage has been asked about the European Convention on Human Rights. Is this legal under international law? He says it is.
I mean, on the top level, it doesn't seem like it is, does it? I mean, if an arm of the British state picks up a refugee, it's now the British state's responsibility to look after that refugee.
Maybe they don't pick them up, maybe they just turn the boat round.
Well, what he's been proposing is to pick them up and then drive them back to France.
Okay.
And at which point you're then having this standoff with the French government on the French shores.
But we're paying the French an awful lot of money to help with this issue, and they are doing nothing. They are literally waving the boats off. So I'm sorry, if you're going to wave the boats off, we reserve the right to turn them around and push them back if necessary. Yeah, not pick them up. Why give them a ferry? They would probably give them snacks along the way.
Gary's been in touch and says, I can't understand why the French government would object to the UK Navy or Border Force vessels towing these migrant boats back to French beaches, or why they're claiming that we would be breaking the law if we did that. They're supposed to be our partners in trying to stop this people trafficking, aren't they? Or at least that's what our new Prime Minister Andy Burnham reckons, and Two-Tier Keir before him claimed, so surely they're as committed to stopping these illegal migrants from leaving France as we are, aren't they? And if they are not, well, why are we giving them hundreds of millions of pounds each year to pretend to do it? I mean, that is a good point. All good points from Gary.
No, absolutely right. And I mean, when we're talking about Keir Starmer's policy as well, it's something like 40% reduction in the last 6 months of small boats coming into the UK. So there has been something happening. It's
42.9%. Nigel Farage said 40%. Andy Burnham said 50%. They're both factually wrong, but you know, we're talking about 42.9%.
It's a big number, to be fair.
It is. Yeah. It is a big number.
Both wrong. But
is this all a massive distraction from all the pressure? Nigel Farage, a little bit of Richard Tice as well. I don't think that's really that big a deal, to be brutally honest, the Richard Tice thing. But the Nigel Farage controversy over his 5 million donation and so on, is this just a distraction technique? What do you think, Joe?
No, I don't think it is a distraction technique. I think it is a very, very big issue, and it's one that the electorate in this country are very concerned about. Notably, Andy Burnham said absolutely nothing about it, you know, when he was
in his first week, he did not utter the word immigration
no, he did
publicly
not.
Once.
Or the boats. And And now that it's become an issue, he seems very wishy-washy with it. It seems like, well, I'll go with whatever. You know, I do not understand how we can have had so many people come to our shores across what is a relatively short sea crossing, and the ability to turn them back. There has always been that ability, one way or another, and it seems we're actually running a taxi service, which is disgusting.
Same question. Distraction technique or not?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has been sliding it in the polls in the last couple of weeks based off of all of what you've mentioned before, whether it's the $5 million from Christopher Harborne, whether it's his mate that was convicted for fraud in the United States, and then this new thing with Richard Tice. Whether it has cut through or not with Tice, it's a different story. It's just...
I think Tice thing is pretty minor, to be honest. I mean,
it is a minor, but it's another straw on top of the camel. Yeah. So I mean, when you're looking at it, it's not a new policy from Reform UK. It's something that's
they've talked about before.
People would expect it from Reform.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, quite a number of people have been in touch about exactly the same thing. Testy on Tyneside says, obvious to me that Mr Rupert Lowe's mission is to keep Reform on target as a genuine right-wing option, lest they slip into lame, wet Toryism, whether on purpose or not. It's essential. As we all know, we've got at least 2029 to suck up communism under Labour, so be it, as long as there's alignment before the next general election. We'll get into that in a second after the break with Sean and Joe, and we'll find out what they think. Daryl in Lincoln says, I listened to Zia Youssef earlier today, and they're not talking about using warships. They want the Navy to use fast, small boats. When he was asked about the French not wanting them, he should have said that the French would surely want to stop all illegal immigrants, because most of the migrants they get are coming here, so half the ones they get wouldn't come if they knew they wouldn't get into Britain. And Martin says, thank you for reading the message, as most don't. Farage is a likeable, intelligent man, but his record of backtracking on his bold statements isn't. Remember the deport all illegal immigrants talk that got him through the headlines? Isn't the policy, though, is it? And another one from Elaine, just before the break, he says, Nigel should never have got rid of Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Huge mistake, as he would have been a great defence spokesman, but Nigel panicked, got rid of him, without so much as speaking to him about the controversy. It was nothing but bad actors causing him trouble, and Nigel fell for it. Get him back, Nigel. Please beg him if needs be. And that is Rear Admiral Chris Parry, who has contributed, and indeed continued to contribute to this station. He was a candidate for a mayoral role and then pulled out of that because of a controversy over race. Dawn says, if the right don't unite, the UK is finished. We would be stuck with Andy and a soundbite. Sounds like a pop group. Okay, well, on that melodious note, we'll go to a break and we'll come back in just a second. Loads to discuss. I'd like a word on Restore and Reform. Also, whether early release will lead to patrol cuts. That's what the police are talking about. And 1,500 foreign criminals living in the UK asylum homes. And guess who's paying the bill? Yep, you and me. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sim in Wanstead says, "Hi Peter, hope you're well." Thank you, Sim, hope you are too. If Rupert was serious, why didn't he private message Nigel instead of the weird music in the background video? Yeah, politicians like communicating, I suppose, and when they have a video they don't need to be asked questions by pesky people like me. Margaret in Birmingham's been through and says, "Absolutely lovely photo of you, Larry, in yesterday's paper." I saw that in the Mail on Sunday, actually. Lying down in front of number 10 with sunflowers as a backdrop. Did you see it? I did see it, and it was sent to me by a number of people, including my father. She also says 4 days of text not getting through. My phone is obviously on the blink. Margaret, you're always welcome to contribute. We do get a lot of messages, and they don't. What happens is that they come through on a big long list, and the top team behind the glass star certain ones to go through, so we can't read every single message we receive. We do read as many of them as we can, but sometimes people say, "Oh, my messages never get through." Well, sometimes we just get too many, and it's great. It's a good problem to have, but we just can't read every single message, unfortunately. But please do send them in, especially through WhatsApp, which is totally free, of course, as well. Joe Wheeler and Sean Hickey are with me on the debate desk. On Restore and Farage, actually, let's hear a little bit from Farage first before I get your opinion on this. And Farage talking about a potential Restore Britain pact, talking about this morning at the same press conference.
You could see a situation where Restore, without the hope of winning anything outside Great Yarmouth, I mean literally without a hope of winning a single seat in the country, could do us great harm. And I think online you will see a lot of Restore potential voters now beginning to worry about the impact that might have. So look, I'll finalise that by saying if it was the offer of a deal, it came in a very unusual way. I have responded to it, potentially, with an open mind, as I would.
Nigel Farage responding to what Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore Britain, said in a video. Let's have a little look at this.
So, Nigel, my message is simple. If you are prepared to work together around serious policies, serious reform, and serious government, then so are we. Not because it's politically convenient for Restore Britain, not because it's personally easy, but millions and millions of British people deserve a patriotic government that puts our national interest before any personal differences that you and I may have.
I mean, there are quite a lot of personal differences, and even since then he's accused Farage of lying, but apparently remains open to a deal. He says that I do not want to make private conversations public, but Farage has just done so at a national press conference. He said to me yesterday, "Shall we have a call?" Sadly, that is a lie. Yesterday at 10:30, Nigel messaged me saying the following 3 words: "Will call later." The evidence is below. I've received no call. Senior reform figures then went public to rubbish my offer. Not looking good, is it, Sean?
It's cute in a way, isn't it? It's like a romantic comedy almost, that these two are like, well, you call me, no, I'll call you, no, he didn't call me.
No, you hang up. You stop the boats. No, you stop the boats.
It's hilarious. I mean, we're sat here talking about, like, I think 6 months ago we were having this thing of like, is Rupert Lowe going to be the end of reform? Now he's getting to the point where he feels like, it seems that he feels like he's hit the high water mark in his polling. Farage is starting to go on the dip. So this, for Rupert Lowe, seems to be an opportune time to get back into the party. But it's just, it's like watching an episode of Friends.
I think this is a rom-com that never happened.
Can I just say, if anyone does make a rom-com, I'm available for a cameo as... You don't even need to give me a character name, just be like, good-looking presenter. That's it.
You can be that.
Appears as himself, yeah, exactly.
The trouble is, listening to these two talk, if it was some kind of online dating, game, or one of those programmes, where you try and match people, you go, no, this isn't going to work. And yet, if the right are to go forward, then these two parties have to find a way to, if not amalgamate, rub along together. Otherwise, they're going to continue to split that vote.
There is that smarting still from Farage. In 2019, he stood down a load of candidates. I tell you something, I promise you, I was campaigning for Sir Robert Buckland, who was my then boss in South Swindon. My job was to be the deputy campaign manager of his campaign at that time. And I promise you, I was lugging the campaign manager was staying in his house, in his parents' house, and I was lugging my luggage up the stairs. And I wasn't at the top of the stairs, and Alex, who was the campaign manager, said, the Brexit Party candidate has pulled out. And before I'd even opened my case, I knew we'd won the election. I knew that was it, because the vote could have been split by a Brexit Party candidate, and I knew Robert was home and dry. And everything we did over the next 5 or 6 weeks, it was important, it was good to do it, brilliant volunteers, good campaign, but I knew we were going to win.
It was very interesting what Rupert Lowe was asking for, which is, if we're going to go forward together, then I want a referendum on capital punishment. We're going to deport everybody. There were a couple more, and I thought, oh, ouch. OK, that's a bit harsh. As a divorce deal, that'll be hard. As a marriage proposition, it's not looking great.
I'm loving these metaphors. It's great. You know, I was once cruelly axed from a drama.
No.
Yeah. So my landlady at the time is a woman called Sam McAllister, who was a producer in Newsnight, who got the Prince Andrew interview, and they made a sort of docudrama for Netflix about this whole thing called Scoop. She wrote a very well-received book on it as well.
Played by Billy Piper.
Played by Billy Piper, exactly. Yeah. And there was no cameo from Hot Lodger. I was her lodger, and there was no cameo from Hot Lodger axed. Also, our cat, Jack, was axed from it as well.
That's shocking.
If you have Brad Pitt for something like that, surely you don't cut the scenes that he's in.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. He is older than Nigel Farage.
Yeah, that's right.
Is he really?
Yeah, he is older than Nigel Farage. Anyway, let's talk about whether early release will lead to patrol cuts. The police warning. This is an assistant chief constable. This is Jason, what's his name? Jason Devonport, who has said there's an uncomfortable reality that because of the overcrowding crisis, criminals would now spend less time in prison and more time being managed in communities, and that means that because custodial sentences of less than 12 months were abandoned in March, many criminals have gone on to re-offend and breach the conditions, leading to extra pressure on policing.
And honestly, there are some things that you read and you just think, I want to cry. I mean, quite apart from the fact that you don't really know who's on the streets of your locality. If you go out walking your dog at night or down to the, the local shop or whatever it is, the idea that we're going to have criminals on early release walking around the place, and OK, they may be on tag, maybe on licence, whatever, but as a woman, she, her, it is getting increasingly worrying just walking out of your house and walking around. So they're saying ministers are urgently looking at ways to expand unpaid community work. I'm sorry, I don't want them on the streets. I don't want them in the local park. I don't want to be taking my dog into a park where I've got, possible criminals.
There isn't room in the prisons, though.
Well, then build more prisons. Do something. I don't really care. But ultimately, sorry, how unsafe can we feel in our own country? This is just beyond understanding.
But I mean, also relying on unpaid workers to check in on these people is a bizarre sticking plaster on the policy in the first place.
The whole point about whether short sentences work as well. I mean, if you're a shoplifter who has 150 convictions, there's got to be some custodial option. You can't just say, but now we're in a position where custodial sentences of less than 12 months are abandoned in March, so you've got to be sent to prison for more than a year. I mean, that to me is something like short sentences don't work. They basically just make you become a better criminal. But also, there's got to be some form of deterrent, doesn't there?
Well, I mean, deterrent reform, I think the way the prison system operates in this country in the first place is probably one of the stranger ways to expect people to leave prison and be a reformed, stand-up member of society. And I'm not talking about things like sex offenders or things like that, but rather shoplifters, petty crime.
Some people can't be, I mean, there are just some evil people, like Axel Rudick-Guman, I don't think can ever be rehabilitated. And there are some people who can be rehabilitated. And my point, and we're actually going to speak to Ian Aitchison about this a little bit later on, who's a former prison governor. He's, unless you're Rose West or Wayne Couzens, you're going to get out. So what do we then do to prepare those people for society, Jo?
Well, this has always been the entire question about prisons. Is it punishment or is it rehabilitation? Yep. So back in November, the MPCC warned that Labour's plan to send few offenders to prison would result in an extra 400,000 crimes in the first 12 months. Well, obviously, those 12 months aren't up yet, but the increased demand has gone up in line with predictions. So obviously, that is not working. But whilst obviously we're looking at the prison population here and ideas of how one might treat prisoners and keep that prison population down. You've also got the situation of the NEETs, the not in education, not in employment. Those people, if they are claiming benefits, should be out doing something. Those are the people who should be picking up the litter in the park. Those are the people who should be doing some, not unpaid work, because they're getting money from the government.
Should they get discounts on sex toys? This,
I'll leave the second half.
Wow.
I saw this.
Lowering the tone. Sean just found the tone and he lowered it. There is a story, I promise you today. The best thing is we're talking to James Hodgkinson about it later and I can't wait. It's about...
70% off with Love Honey.
Really?
Absolutely. I mean, that's an extraordinary discount.
It's a quality discount.
Other brands are available and they're just not as good. I'm told. So I mean, should benefits claimants get discounts on?
No.
Okay.
They absolutely shouldn't. No, that's not fair.
Sean?
I mean, it isn't the government that's giving them these discounts. I mean, you look at things like uni days and things like this. There's vouchers for X demographic of people. I mean, the amount of time we spend talking about benefits claimants, I think the biggest benefits claimants in the United Kingdom, the pensioners, is always one that always seem to get a slight.
They say they've paid into it. All the rest of the paid their stamp. Joe, interestingly, a moment ago you said she, her. What are your pronouns, Sean?
He, him.
He, him, and she, her. Do you know what my pronouns are?
What are they?
Each, many. Don't misgender me. Stay with us.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about 1,500 foreign criminals living in the UK asylum homes, and we taxpayers are paying the bills. Front page of the Express today. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, we should have a stronger system to vet people that are coming in and out of the country. It is mental, objectively, when you look at how much money the UK spends on asylum processing every single year, but somehow criminals are found or not found and then brought into the system anyway to be processed. I think there's a lot of the problem in this one, I think I was reading, was that there are a lot of returns agreements that haven't been signed with countries yet. And I think this is possibly a hangover from previous governments that the current government should be getting a handle on. But the fact that you cannot send criminals back to their origin country because you haven't signed an agreement with them is for the birds.
Which is frightening. Those countries, Afghanistan, Sudan, Eritrea, Iran and Syria. All this came to light because of a freedom of information request by the Daily Express to the Home Office, who had been resisting. Saying exactly how many. In fact, this is written in such a way that when you look at the headline, 1,500 foreign criminals, you may not even see the word criminals to begin with, but the actual figures The number of foreign criminals living in communities, despite being eligible for deportation, has soared from 3,900 in 2012 to almost 20,000 this year, doubling in the final 3 months of 2020.
Okay.
Horrendous figures. And sorry, why are we paying for them? I mean, this is a bit like the boats again. Sorry, why can't we tow them back to France? That's where they came from. They came from somewhere else. Why weren't they vetted when they came in? Why can't, you know, once they get here, are we stuck with them?
We're going to discuss this all with Ian Aitchison in a few minutes' time. He's a former prison governor. He's a Home Affairs expert. He's written all sorts of reviews for the Ministry of Justice. He's a professor at the university. Loads to discuss with him. Very, very good guest. Becca's been in touch and says, how are you going to build new prisons when you haven't got the staff to work there? My son lasted 6 months until he witnessed stuff he shouldn't at 25 and then told prisoners have more human rights than him. Another person says, a prison a la Kurt Russell's escape from New York would suit most of us just fine. For the worst offenders, does any sane person care? John says, punishment, rehabilitation. Once again, the talking heads forget deterrent. I don't think we have, actually, and we will talk about that more with Ian as well. Lots to discuss. I want to get through a couple more stories before the 8 o'clock news. The World Cup and the fact that Gianni Infantino is having trouble. UEFA leading a push to force Gianni Infantino resignation as the World Cup plan collapses. Sean?
I mean, a man that associates with people like Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump and Gulf leaders that have various human rights abuses, various workers' rights abuses in designing and constructing and holding the World Cups in their countries. I would not be... I'm asking the question, why has it taken so long in the first place to actually do something about this man at the helm?
Yes.
I mean, when you're in a position where you are having to decide now that the reason why we're going to get rid of this man is because we disagree with the principle of selling off shares in the World Cup, rather than, well, actually, I'm opposed to the idea that we're hosting a World Cup in a country where LGBT people are not allowed to exist, where there are no opposition parties allowed to exist in the case of Russia. And all of these things are egregious things for a sporting body that claims to be for peace to have in its address book.
Yes.
And so when you have all of that in the history of FIFA, and now it's only a financial situation that we're coming to.
Now, finally, people are taking a stand. Joe, your take on this?
I think I agree with most of what he said, for the very simple reason...
First time for everything.
This is a little bit like learning a foreign language to me. Obviously, we've just had the World Cup, and then all this has blown up, and I'm like, you know, what's it all about? I'm afraid I really can't contribute anything particularly good to this, apart from the fact he doesn't sound like a nice chap at all.
It's worth considering as well that Gianni Baby was brought in the first place to clean up house after Sepp Blatter being so corrupt in the first place.
But I mean, FIFA is not exactly a model of probity. A couple of other stories I want to talk about. One is that Labour has been blasted after 160,000 businesses close in 6 months under the weight of the national insurance hikes and extra red tape. The Employment Rights Act is something that is not popular at all with employers. They're costing more money to employ people. Minimum wage has gone up as well. Joe, your thoughts on that?
You know, when you're at school and you learn equations, you know, this plus this is going to equal that. It was obvious.
I'm not sure that's an equation. I think that's a sum.
Oh, yes. OK, sorry. Yeah, all right.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Forgive me for being pedantic. My facts and everything.
Right, sorry. Yeah, but basically, you know, the measures they put in place it doesn't add up. Those were the very simple words I was searching
but sorry, Joe, I just couldn't resist it.
I know, and it was worth it.
I mean, when it comes to the Employment Rights Act, I mean, I don't want workers not to have rights, but I also want it to be easy for people to employ them.
Well, yes, exactly. And an awful lot of these have gone in the lower wage bracket, which is where the young people aren't being able to find any jobs. You know, it's the Saturday jobs that have gone. It's the part-time jobs in pubs. The stuff that every youngster grows up and gets a bit of experience, bit of pocket money, you know, whilst they're studying or whatever else. And they've just vanished.
I would say, though, that it's not entirely about the Employment Rights Act. I mean, you had things like the threat of increasing business rates, and particularly on hospitality.
It's a lot of things.
Andy Burnham's now U-turned on, but at the time when Rachel Reeves was in, the threat of that happening has caused these people to shut up shop.
The other one I'm dreadful at is when someone says you have two choices, you can go or you can't go, and I said no, you've one choice but two options. That's I'm really like, you know, no jury would convict if someone just gave me a slap, basically. Tell me about Britain's fat jab boom. I must declare an interest in this because I don't have fat jabs, but I have lost nearly a stone in the last 6 weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. Apparently, if you just like do a bit more exercise and eat less food, it you lose weight.
Falls off.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
No, did
anyway,
nobody ever tell you that bit?
No, well, indeed.
No.
One fat jab given out every 7 seconds, Joe.
Is
too much?
Absolutely. I'm really sorry. Did we not learn enough 6 years ago that taking jabs without, you know, some kind of backup proof of what they did? Anyway, let's put it this way. Is it Doncaster, which is the leading hotspot for these jabs, followed by Blackpool, then Leicester? But the cost of this, £706.4 million.
But think about how much it could save the NHS.
Well, there is some claim that £780 million has been wiped from Britain's grocery bills.
Right. But it could save the NHS lots of money. What do you think, Sean?
I mean, it's indicative of an NHS that isn't able to act in the way that it's meant to act in the first place. I think if you were to delve into this further, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it's actually to do with waiting lists in the first place, and GPs don't have the time to have a holistic, say, whether it's a diet plan or whether it's getting to the root of somebody's obesity or their struggles with food.
Well, this is a really good point, and I worry about the fact that there is something that can be, and I'm overweight, and I should be.
You've lost a stone.
Well, I've nearly. But the point, I suppose, is it can be dealt with in a non-medical way. This is about if people exercise and lose weight. I mean, I saw an ad the other day saying obesity is a disease. You know, don't feel bad about it, whatever. And I mean, okay, fine. But actually, there is something people can do, and you don't need these jabs. They're not, and it's medicalising a problem that's not already medicalised. That worries me.
I was going to say, I have read an awful lot about them because, out of interest, because, you know, what a miracle. You take a jab, you know, you start losing weight, and I've got a couple of friends who've tried them. Not necessarily, I mean, great results, but haven't been left feeling terribly well.
Yes.
But there is some suggestion that when you stop using them, you know, the weight comes back.
Oh, of course it does. Yeah.
And at that
well, it's
point,
like a diet. Once you come off a diet, the weight goes back on. Final thought from Sean?
Yeah, I mean, just off that point is that these things need to be done in a very slow, tapered way. And I think especially if you're doing it in a kind of, well, just get out of the office. Here's Manjaro, here's Wegovy, whatever. It's not going to be done in a very safe
and also if people put the weight back on, they're actually not saving the NHS even a penny.
And also these things are being advertised on buses.
Yeah.
I've actually seen huge, you know, posters on the sides of buses.
Yeah.
For an NHS
better
treatment.
than looking like the back end of one, though, if you're too fat, I suppose. Not that you do, Joe, of course. Just to clarify. Can you say
that again before we finish? Yeah.
You don't look like the back end of a bus.
Thank you very much,
There we are. You look
Peter,
lovely. As does Sean. As do I. Joe Wheeler and Sean Erkey, thank you both very, very much for joining me in the debate desk. Lots to come in. HSM will join us in the studio in a second about all the big prison home affairs stories, asylum seekers getting homes. Stay with us here on Talk and get your call in and let me know what you think.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. This is the Evening Exchange, and thank you for your company. We've got an expert on home affairs, a former prison governor. He's written all sorts of reports about dangerous prisoners like Axel Radicabana. He's in the studio. We're going to ask him about all sorts of things, including whether early release will lead to patrol cuts. That's what the police are saying, and what the impact of that is. Also, the 1,500 foreign criminals living in UK asylum homes, and what the impact on all of that is too. You're paying the bill for that. Loads to discuss, including a big research project that Ian's working on called Broken Pipeline. More on that in just a second. We'll also talk later on in the programme about benefits claimants offering discounts on holidays, and get this, sex toys, 70% off sex toys if you are on benefits apparently. And Labour has been blasted after 160,000 businesses have closed in 6 months. I'd love to hear your comments on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Give us a ring, and you can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message, a WhatsApp phone message, or give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock, so stay with us here on Talk. Thank you to Mick, who says 1,500 foreign criminals living in taxpayer-funded housing. The solution would be to house them with refugees. Welcome activists. Ali says prison should only mean one thing, and that's punishment and punishment alone. Well, one man I'd like to put that to is Ian Aitchison, who's with us now, former prison governor, professor, writer of all sorts of reports. There are so many strings to Ian's bow. He's written a great book called Screwed as well, which I should actually declare an interest. We have the same publisher, and my book, which is out in paperback on the 1st of September, is also with Biteback. Take that, Ofcom. Ian, good to have you in the studio. How are you doing?
Oh, great. I mean, I'm wondering how you follow sex toys on the brew, but I'll do my best.
Well, yes, it certainly caused some ructions, some vibrations, some might argue. Punishment should mean one thing, and that's punishment and punishment alone. We're hearing about early release. We're hearing about short sentences being axed, and the police chief warning that it'll lead to patrol cuts because they have so much to do.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, what we're going to see, I think, tomorrow morning is an announcement from government about the pause that the Prime Minister has announced in the early release process. We don't know what's going to be in that, but clearly, I mean, he's going to have to do something about the huge public concern there is around these early release schemes. And this is the latest one that's come about, as you've described. This is the one that's going to reduce sentences from many prisoners on determinate sentences, that, you know, not life sentence prisoners, from a half to a third. And victims are obviously outraged. I think one of the things that I don't know what's coming that Mr Burnham can't do is try to make a virtue out of this. I mean, politics, as you know, Peter, very well, is all about making choices. There was a political choice that was made for the emergency mass release of prisoners before the end of a sentence that a judge said in custody was warranted by the offence. There's no way round that. You can argue that that was because of the ruination of the criminal justice system, and in particular prison capacity, which was generated by absurd austerity schemes in the past. That's not going to wash with victims now, who are looking at still, you know, very serious offenders. We still think there are going to be domestic violence predators, burglars, people convicted of manslaughter, for example, who are going to be eligible for this scheme. Now, I take on board what you've said about the police reaction, and that's very concerning. But I just want to throw something else into the mix. We have a community supervision system that these people are going to be subjected to if and when they are released. And we don't know what this pause is going to produce, of course, until, I think, tomorrow. And that's going to be a problem for policing, which is already under severe pressure. But it's also going to be a problem for the probation service. The probation service currently, absent this 6,000 bulge of prisoners that's going to be presented in September or October, we're not sure yet, they're knackered, to use a technical phrase. I mean, the Chief Inspector of Prisons had said, I think it was, the statistic was 2/3 of public protection risk assessments were unsuitable. And that was because of a combination of staffing cuts, staffing gaps, overworked people who are working far beyond their capacity, inexperience, and a lack of professional curiosity. Now, that's the sort of environment that you're now going to push 6,000 more prisoners into. So the worst thing that Andy Burnham could do is you know, say, right, well, I've made a muscular decision to kind of, you know, restrict in some way some of these releases. So that people are excluded, the people that the big concern is about. Because that's kind of trying to use the emergency mass release as a kind of alibi for using it.
Is this unfair to say this? Is this going too far? Am I exaggerating? Am I speaking in hyperbole? It doesn't seem to me that any aspect of the justice system is working right now. The police aren't working correctly. They're not arresting the right people. They're not, you know, following up crimes in the way they should. The Crown Prosecution Service does some excellent work in many ways, but sometimes the right people aren't prosecuted. The courts are in a massive mess, which we could talk for 3 hours about. The prisons, we know, are not fit for purpose. There aren't enough places. There are so many issues. Probation, you've just talked about. There doesn't seem to be any aspect of that where anything seems to properly work at the moment.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because it's a whole system failure that has been a decade or more in the making. You know, significant underinvestment in the system, a lack of training, but I would also argue a culture that has drifted away from public protection and seems to be now more based on the rights of the offender rather than the rights of the victim. The victim, as you know, is a footnote always in these in these reforms, and although it's always promised that victims will, you know, are apparently in ministers' hearts and minds when they're discussing these things, there's no way around this. You are releasing people, you're traumatising and re-traumatising victims before the court said they should be released.
And we've had PC Andrew Harper's family who've made a very, very public appeal about that. The Prime Minister does seem to be reacting to that, but even when he said we're reviewing this, that caused chaos in prisons. So they say, hold on a second, we need to know when we're releasing these people.
I mean,
you know, here we are a week on and they still don't know.
The probation service has been brutalised beyond all recognition. It's been subject to relentless ideological vandalism. There was the huge disaster over something called transforming rehabilitation, which was effectively, for your listeners, the part privatisation of the probation service, led, by the way, by the now Cabinet Secretary, Antonio Romeo.
Right.
So that wasn't any sort of...
Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Justice,
any sort of impediment to her career, because she's now sitting on the right hand of Andy Burnham, but was found to be, you know, the architect of something that was irredeemably broken. But, you know, that aside... we've got so many problems in the criminal justice system, it is difficult to know where to start. But what you have to do when you're in government, regardless of the complexities and the difficulties, is start from the basics. And that is the government's first duty to its citizens is to protect them and keep them safe. And this is a failure to do that. And anything more than radical announcements tomorrow morning from 10 Downing Street will merely be a panic, improvised reaction. And the poor people in the probation service who've gone through endless, you know, reorganisations and so on, they've got immense problems with staff sickness through stress and so on. There are a lot of people doing a really difficult job well, but there aren't enough of them and they don't have enough experience. And what we're doing is shoveling 6,000 offenders into that workload. And also, just to make the point, Peter, that we seem to be relying on a kind of magic force field here of electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring is only as good as the people who are doing the monitoring.
And we keep saying we'll put more and more people into it. I mean, these 1,500 foreign criminals living in UK asylum homes as well. I mean, that's not what they were originally for. That's the front page of one of the papers today, the Express today. The foreign criminals issue and deporting those people as well, another huge issue.
Well, I mean, we've turned deportation into a sort of taxpayer-funded scheme for foreign offenders to stay here indefinitely, it would seem, from the reports that are being made. And I think one of the problems that has been reported in relation to that, Peter, is that we don't have returns agreements with various countries. So these people are effectively stuck on the taxpayer dollar.
Yeah.
You know, some of these people we know have reoffended very seriously. And that's a big concern. It's a concern for the trust in the justice system. What I would say is that probably a lot of these countries that we fund through the Foreign Office and Foreign Development Office funding. And we should start using some diplomatic leverage on these countries who refuse to take their own citizens back.
Pakistan is a big issue as well, particularly with that rape gang member as well.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you're up to, because we talked a lot about Axel Radikabana last week, 2 years on since Southport. He's gone to Broadmoor. And we've talked previously about HMP Franklin and various places like that where they have really the worst of the worst, essentially. I just wonder what you're working on at the moment and how that can feed into the system and perhaps make it better.
Sure. I mean, one of the things I've observed over many years, and I've written about this, and I've talked to government about this, and various ministers and professionals talk to me in despair sometimes who work in risk management, is that the culture and organisation of dealing with the most dangerous people in the country is irredeemably broken. You look at Radikabana and the atrocious mismanagement of his risk in the community through the inquiry, but also Callaghan, the guy who murdered the students and the school caretaker.
Yeah, 3 people in Nottingham,
again, vast failures in communication, failures of professional curiosity. And I just thought to myself, this can't be the acceptable level of, you know, slaughter that we just have to put up with. There must be a better way.
But we keep having inquiries and we keep being told lessons will be learned and things will change, and they often don't.
Yeah, and one of the questions to ask, actually, in terms of the psychology of all of this, is why aren't lessons learned? You know, so what I'm, you know, to speak back to your point, what I'm trying to do, I've been lucky enough to get some funding for the next year, is basically just look at a blank sheet of paper and saying, if we want to manage highly dangerous people in the making and after they commit offences, but particularly in the pre-crime stage. And these are children, these are young adults and adults. They may be ideologically motivated, they may be motivated by you know, the sadistic interest in mass casualties. That doesn't matter, and the dead don't care what their motivation is, frankly. We need one unified system that will be able to spot and stop these offenders, and if they can't be spotted and stopped, they need to be controlled properly. None of that's happening.
Is this a broader version of Prevent, or just a version of Prevent that works?
Prevent certainly feeds into this, and that's our surveillance system that has been completely subverted, I believe, ideologically, and isn't fit for purpose at the moment. But I'm talking, I suppose, about a small agency, which is multidisciplinary. We hear lots about multi-agency working. Multi-agency working in risk management doesn't work. It just does not work. You have organisations that are philosophically, organisationally different from each other, trying to work together. You've poor information sharing. You've got professional boundaries. You've got, in the case of the Westminster Bridge attacker, you've got the security service, you know, turning up at some of these risk management meetings and not even announcing who they are and not saying anything and just, you know, buggering off again. You can't manage complex people and spot them and stop them with that sort of process. You have to have, in my opinion, a national unified service or agency. And it's one of the things I'm going to be asking people, particularly the professionals, that speak to me sometimes in despair about just how ruined risk management is, and that particularly applies to sexual predators and domestic violence abusers. And the police are completely overwhelmed with managing that. But how are you going to spot the black swans in among all the kind of low-level offenders, the people we really need to be scared of? And what do you do with them? Because particularly in relation to...
especially if they haven't committed a crime.
Yeah, well, my very point. We need to talk quite seriously about things like preventative detention, which, in old money is called internment.
Yeah.
Now, that obviously scares the pants off ministers and people clutch their pearls. But just to give you an example, in Germany, and Germany, is hugely concerned with protecting its constitution for obvious reasons of history. Germany will preventatively detain serious sexual offenders after their offence has been committed and after they've been released from custody on the basis that they think they're going to offend again.
Right, okay.
And this is Germany. We need to look widely at what other countries are doing, because we cannot keep going on with these atrocious crimes being committed by people who are doing them in plain sight, who are falling through a threadbare net of different agencies, some of which, you know, and I've been to various events where I've listened to Home Office officials emote, for example, about Axel Rudakabana being a child with needs, literally portraying him like that. And I had to put my hand up and say, actually, the children who were murdered by him have needs, and certainly greater than his. So we have to find a way to recalibrate the culture and the structure of what we're doing, and that's what I'm about. And you're quite right, I've called it the broken pipeline, because it is hopelessly fractured between the person who is at risk and the crime that gets committed. And we have to change the way we look at things, and we've got to beef up actually our approach and our resolution towards controlling these people.
Just before you go, Ian, and thank you for coming into the studio this evening, I know Rod Liddle was someone you knew well. I knew him a little bit, but you knew him far better than I did. Just tell us about Rod Liddle, who's very sadly died today.
Well, I wouldn't say I knew Rod well, but I certainly I did have many encounters with him, and he was at The Spectator, and obviously an established writer when I started writing for that brand, and he was very kind to me on several occasions and gave me encouragement and so on. And you know, what I would say, people will have polarised views about Rod. I thought he was a hilarious polemicist, and you know, somebody who made fun of the ruling class, but just had a way of doing so which just skewered the absurd people sometimes who are running the country and in charge of us. But the other thing I would say about him is he was incredibly kind, and I guess you and others that knew him.
I received that. I received that kindness, and actually later on, we're talking to someone from very much the opposite side of the political spectrum to Rod Liddle. He's going to say exactly that as well. Yeah, his kindness was underrated, but it's a very sad loss to the public square, and obviously he was taken too soon and rather suddenly, and I'm very, very sad for his family. And lots of people getting in touch about Rod Liddle as well. We'll read out some of your messages after the break. We'll go to the phones as well. Lots of people want to talk about reform and restore, but for the meantime, I just want to say thank you to Ian Aitchison joining us in the studio. Lots to discuss. What do you think about what he said? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
$49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Zarina, who's been in touch. She says, why can't the authorities bite the bullet, employ all the graduates who can't get a job into the police, border patrols, prison service and the NHS? The country is sinking and all the systems are broken. Stop or suspend the charity funds to other nations. Plough it into mass training with proper incentives for our children and young people who need work. Something radical must change. Laws must change to combat the mass migration we witness every day. I'm fed up hearing the same old issues with the same old explanations, nothing being corrected. Things must change, says Zarina. Thank you. Quite a number of people have been in touch about Rod Liddle as well. I just want to reflect that. We will talk about it later on in the programme, but let me just read a couple of messages. Stephen in Belfast says, I was so saddened to hear of the death of Rod Liddle, all the more as our ages are similar. I'm currently in my 4th month in hospital with a potentially fatal heart condition. It's brought my own mortality sharply into focus. Condolences to all at Talk. Stephen, I'm really sorry to hear that that has happened and that you're in such a in bad shape, and I hope that hopefully we're helping you get through those days, and I wish you very, very well indeed. Margaret's in Birmingham and says, to save our country, I hope Nigel, Rupert and maybe Ben Habib can get round the table and put their differences to one side. Let's hear from Claire in East Sussex. Claire's been in touch. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. This is a big topic a lot of people want to talk about. Claire, you have the first word on it, and I think you're a new caller. I think it's maybe the first time we've spoken anyway. You're very, very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you so much. I listen to you all the time.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I have been saying for such a long time that Restore and Reform need to get together, you know, and I know so many Reform voters have gone to Restore and so on, and they're on the same page, okay? So it makes more sense for them to get together. Restore gets MPs in Parliament, right? And then once Reform gets in for 4 years or whatever, then Restore can then put their policies through, and that at least they will be in Parliament.
Yeah, you can get something done when you're in power, can't you? Yeah.
Exactly, because voting for Restore right now is kind of pointless, really, because they've got no bloody MPs.
Well, they've got Rupert Lowe, I suppose, but yes, that's just one. Yeah,
exactly.
So, and how? I mean, there's clearly bad blood between the two main men, Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. They just got to get over it.
100%, because at the end of the day, these two people are on the same page. Yes, they have little differences in that, but they're on the same page about getting rid of this flippin' migrant situation, right? And that's what we need. We need to get rid of Labour, Lib Dems and Green Party.
Yeah.
Keep Conservative in, all right? Because I like the Conservative leader, by the way.
Okay.
I think she's really strong, really good. Keep them in, have the three of them in, right? And let's go hell for leather. Let's get this country back together.
Do you think Kemi Badenoch has done things to change the Conservatives? I mean, there's record immigration under them previously. Can she move on for that? Has she reinvented the party for you?
100%. I think if Reform and Restore work together, right, and I think Conservative could take. They could. I think the three of them could actually.
Yeah, there could be some sort of coalition or something. I think the most likely thing after the next election is a hung parliament, but it could be 3 years away. Claire, thank you very, very much, and please ring again. You're great, and really good to hear that common sense and those well thought out opinions. So please do give me a shout back anytime. Laura Jane's in Hampshire, a more regular caller, it must be said, someone who comes on the airwaves from time to time. Always good to hear from her. Laura Jane, what do you make of what the boots plan that Nigel has?
Well, I'm sure you did listen to the conference this morning when he launched Operation Fortress, but I did, and I learnt a few things.
Yes.
I didn't. The business about the Royal Navy and the cost, etc. Well, it's very interesting because what he was saying is that in Ramsgate Harbour, you've got 4 great big cutters sitting there, which are used by Border Force, and Reform would also use them with the Royal Marines and any Army personnel in conjunction with Border Force. there's also 2 other big boats which sit and costs us hundreds of thousands a day, which all they do is go and pick up empties, i.e. abandoned dinghies. And so those would be used. And then apparently at Lydd Airport there are spotter planes, gigantic drones, small drones. And then, of course, you've got the RNNI, which I know isn't taxpayers' money. It's, voluntary.
Yeah, charity.
It's a charity.
Yeah.
But, basically what they're saying is that they would use all of this, which at the moment has been costing hundreds of thousands per day, and we haven't chosen to use it in the right way. Picking up dinghies, I mean, for goodness sake, isn't that a bit of a waste of money, using big boats to pick up dinghies? It seems to me that the Operation Fortress has written out in their document, they have, outlined exactly how they would do it. And the other thing that Nigel said, which surprised me, I don't know why, that it was so naive of me, is that the French locals living in Calais and along the villages would all love us to sort it out for them.
Well, they're having a miserable time too. They want to get it sorted.
They have a miserable time. They can't sell their houses because, there's a crime, there are murders, there's all these things going on. So, I think some of the politicians are coming round to talking to Nigel because they realise their constituent would also like the problem solved.
Well, those are very, very good points, Laura Jane, and thank you for them. That's Laura Jane in Hampshire there. Great points from Claire and from Laura Jane. One a new caller, one a much more frequent contributor, and delighted to have Laura Jane on the air. And wherever you are on the spectrum, whether you're a new contributor or you've been contributing a lot to my programmes, you're all very, very welcome on the air. I love the guests, but I love the callers even more. 0344 499 1000. Another one I really value the contribution of is Karen in Bournemouth, who I've spoken to a few times over the last few months since I've been doing the show. Believe it or not, 5 months doing the Evening Exchange. Karen, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you think Rupert Lowe's up to?
Good evening, Peter, and thanks for your kindness. I think Rupert Lowe's message wasn't for Nigel Farage. He's trying to push Andy Burnham into an early election because he knows that neither Farage nor he will win if Andy Burnham goes to an election now.
Right.
It gives 5 years to get rid of Nigel rather than just the 2.5 that he's got at the moment.
Do you really think that's what he's up to?
Yeah, I think that's the game he's playing.
OK, so should Nigel Farage be cautious then?
I think Nigel should just say, well, we're putting our plans together. When there is an announcement of election, then maybe we can talk. But I think at the moment he should just ignore them all and say, right, these are the plans that we're putting together, and carry on, because there hasn't been an election called.
No, you're right, and I don't think there will be one. Yeah, I don't think there'll be one for 3 years. I really don't.
No, I don't think so either. Okay. So I think that's what Rupert Lowe was planning. He's trying to scare Andy Burnham into calling an election now, because he knows that he'll win it now.
OK, very interesting thoughts, Karen. Thank you for that. That's Karen in Bournemouth there. Mike in Milton Keynes says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Mike. My take on the Rupert Lowe offer is that Lowe knows his party will never get into government, and by putting out his olive branch to Nigel will hopefully get him a senior minister role within the Reform government when elected, should Nigel need his skills. Penny says, good evening. Good gracious. Bev Craig, new Mayor of Manchester, who is Burnham's deputy, looks as if she's been cloned with Burnham. A female version, and no doubt is useless with all that she's going to do, but won't. Will we ever get someone to do what the UK actually wants? No, says Penny. Steve says offshoring is creating a huge skills gap. In the telecom industry, large numbers of highly skilled engineers have been offshored. This creates a skills gap which can never be filled again, since if we don't have the skill here, we're not training new skills. Well, Steve, we're going to talk about that in just a second, actually. Very good guest, Neil Carberry, who's the Chief Executive of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. Great guy. A number of tributes to Rod Liddle. Stephen says, the sudden death of Rod Liddle has made me very, very sad. I didn't know him, but I feel like I've lost a friend. I will miss his honesty and wit. Rest in peace, sir. And a great one from this texter. He says, Peter, gosh, how Rod Liddle would have loved the report of sex toys for benefits claimants. I, like many, loved him. R.I.P. Rod. We will be paying tribute to him properly from someone on a different side of the political argument from him, who really, really liked his wit, his wisdom, his kindness, sometimes controversial opinions, but That's all fine, isn't it? We welcome them here at Talk. And if you want to get your voice on the air between now and 10 o'clock about any topic, about Rod Liddle, about migration, about Nigel Farage, about prisons, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, you give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about 160,000 businesses closing in 6 months, worse than during the COVID lockdowns. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just been having a quick look at Twitter there over the break, and thanks to everybody who's tweeted me or tweeted the programme. Leah says the whole triumvirate debacle of Nigel, Rupert and Ben, referring to Farage, Lowe and of course Ben Habib, is truly disheartening by their actions that are akin to spoiled children. No matter the rights or wrongs or who has the moral high ground, this whole storm in a teacup is very disrespectful to the working folk of the UK who can't begin to contemplate another term of hard left-wing policies. Get real, Nigel and Rupert. Wise up. Hand at the back says, during your discussion about early release, your guest Ian claimed the police forces are under pressure. This is patently untrue. Any force that can spare 5 armed officers to arrest a man for hate speech and numerous other similar cases is completely underutilised. I think she's maybe referring to what happened to Graham Linehan, who's actually received, I think, £25,000 in compensation after a wrongful arrest. Carol in Liverpool says, I'm a pensioner and we are told that our pension is a benefit. So if we wanted sex toys, could we get the discount? Very good one, Carol. Jill says, if they are going to talk, do it in private. Handbags at dawn being played out to the public does more harm than good. And the final one from Nick, who says, the people thinking Rupert Lowe's offer was genuine need to ask themselves, why has he done it? Up to now, he has shown that all he has been out for is to stop Nigel Farage saving the country. The people who benefit from this seem to be the Conservatives. Says Nick Heath. Well, there are all sorts of allegations anyway, which Rupert Lowe denies, that he is in hock to the Conservatives and there are Conservatives advising him on how to undermine Nigel Farage. We'll talk a bit more about that as the show goes on. But I want to talk about something else now, which is Labour, who've been criticised after 160,415 businesses have closed in 6 months under the full weight, it's said, of the national insurance hikes and extra red tape. Business openings in the last 6 months of the year stood at 157,980, lower than during COVID and at any time since the first half of 2023, straight after the pandemic. It peaked at 193,000-ish. The Shadow Chancellor has been very critical of Labour. He says Labour don't understand business. The new regulations and higher taxes are destroying jobs and punishing the businesses that drive the economy. There are, of course, all sorts of issues around this, the Employment Rights Act, their national insurance rises and so on. Well, one person who's not political, he's an impartial observer, but he's a great observer and has a lot of really interesting, informed stuff to say on this, is Neil Carberry. He's the Chief Executive of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. It's great to have you on the programme, Neil.
Good to be here.
What do you make of it? Is this a fair criticism of the government?
I think it's certainly fair to say that government hasn't made life easier for businesses over the last couple of years. In fact, it goes on before the general election, actually, because there's a number of things the Conservative government did that didn't help. We talk a lot about the cost of living crisis, don't we? But the cost of living crisis is caused by prices going up, and prices tend to go up because businesses need to put them up. You saw that with John Healey this morning talking about supermarket price gouging, allegedly, which to anyone who understands how British supermarkets work and that they offer cheaper food than almost anywhere in Europe on tiny profit margins is absolutely ludicrous. What happens is input prices are forced up by government. And if you think about the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen the national minimum wage go up by a third. We're all in favour of a rising minimum wage, but it has to be paid for. We've got the apprenticeship levy. We've now got this big swinging increase in national insurance, which is the biggest tax businesses pay, much bigger than corporation tax or anything else. The cost of doing business in Britain has been going up. At the consumer-facing end, retail pubs, you can see the impact of that. People might have noticed the locals are shutting down, and you're getting bigger pubs. That is driven by the cost of doing business. Small shops shutting down, and increasingly you're seeing businesses pushing some jobs offshore in areas like marketing.
We had a message about that a minute ago about offshoring. I don't know if you heard it, if you're on the line at the point.
Yeah,
but
I did.
Someone was saying, yeah, offshoring a big thing, and then the skills are lost and they're not taught to the next generation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what we're seeing is you look at, particularly in our time zone, countries in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa, Tanzania, Nigeria, now producing skilled graduates who can do jobs like marketing, much lower cost than is done in the UK. And if businesses are desperate to keep jobs here in the UK, but ultimately, when your hand is forced, you start to look at these offshored options. So it's really important that we understand the whole cost of employment. And this isn't about holding wages down. It's about all the other things that pile on top of wages that businesses are forced to pick up, particularly national insurance. And you mentioned it yourself, the upcoming cost of the Employment Rights Act, which promises to be a real roadblock from here on in.
What is your thought and what is your kind of instinct about what people, and particularly businesses, think of the Employment Rights Act? Because nobody wants employees not to have rights. Nobody wants them to be forced to work for less pay or whatever, the weekend and holiday pay and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's sick pay. It's all important. But actually, is the Employment Rights Act, in your opinion, actually going to inhibit how business is done? And are businesses prepared for these things being implemented over the course of the next year or two?
Businesses can't be prepared because government hasn't made clear the rules yet, and that's some point that we keep making, which is the longer government takes to set the rules out, you don't get to squeeze businesses' implementation time. That means you have to push implementation back.
Right.
But within that, we managed to get a deal last December on unfair dismissal we think is kind of workable. But there's two things happening in the Employment Rights Act. If you look at the 0 hours rules, where there was actually an agreement a few years ago between businesses and trade unions that said, look, if someone's on a 0 hours contract and they've worked the same hours in the same pattern for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, they probably should have a contract that reflects that. That seems fair. And most businesses will say that seems fair. That's not what's in the Act. What's in the Act is a right to fixed hours after a very short period of time, whether or not the company can afford to offer it. And the effect will be not less negative for companies than it is for workers themselves, because companies will just won't offer that work out. They'll go to overtime or other ways of coping. So I think the big criticism business has of the Employment Rights Act, Peter, is that the Act is very driven by a certain way of thinking about the jobs market in Whitehall, in the trade union movement. It doesn't actually reflect the day-to-day life of workers in companies on shop floors.
On that exact point, Jason has been in touch from the Lake District. He runs a small business. He says those 160,000 businesses closing are a direct result, Jason argues, of the policies forced through by a government who shouldn't be anywhere near running the country. None of them have any business experience and are directly responsible for the consequences of their policies. Families who have worked every hour to keep their businesses open, like we did. We worked 120 hours a week for 5 years. We were treated like a cash cow for the rest of the country. We have been massively let down by the people governing us, and they haven't got a clue. And when it comes, thank you, Jason, for that. And when it comes to the business experience in the Cabinet, there are two people who have business experience. One of them is Andy Burnham, who worked for a small publisher for a while, which is obviously a private sector business. The other one is Louise Haigh, the First Secretary of State, who worked for Aviva, and she left that because she was convicted of fraud.
So look, I think the critical thing is less what people have done in their previous career, so much as are they willing to listen to small business owners about what it's like to run a small business. I spent a few years on the Low Pay Commission that sets the minimum wage, and in those days I was always very struck by how people missed the fact that a lot of these small businesses, when you're ramping up employee rights, the people who take the slack are the owners, who are often themselves taking less out of the business than their workers
sorry
are
to interrupt you, Neil, but I've had owners of businesses who've been in touch with this programme in the last couple of weeks saying that they haven't taken a wage in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and particularly the way the national insurance rise was done, where the complex point, but there's the rate and there's the threshold. There's the point at which you start paying national insurance for a worker, and if government needed to raise that amount of money, you could put the rate up, but they also slashed the threshold. And what that meant was it made people at the lower end of the earnings scale, so entry-level workers in hospitality and retail businesses, much more expensive to employ. And guess what's happened since? Our youth unemployment's gone through the roof. Because now a young person costs much the same as a 27, 28, 29-year-old with some experience to employ, and businesses will naturally choose the person who can plug and play into their workplace.
And on that exact point, we've just got a message from Richard in Bromsgrove, who says, concerning apprenticeships, my 19-year-old son wants to be a carpenter. He's doing a level 3 college course, but really needs to get experience from people who do carpentry every day. He applies daily, but is rejected constantly. I spoke and hoped to a builder as to whether he knew of anybody looking for an apprentice, and he says no one's taking on anyone due to laws, costs, and the fact the apprentice doesn't pay his way quickly enough. Andy Burnham talks a good job, but there's nothing out there for teenagers to apply for, and talks of hope. My son just wants to learn a trade. It's not too much to ask, is it? And it's not too much to ask. It's a perfectly reasonable request. Richard's trying to help his son. His son's working hard. He's a 19-year-old who wants a job. He can't get one.
So let's be clear, where I agree with the Prime Minister is we as businesses have to step up, right? We have to commit to work shadowing, to creating apprenticeships, to all the things that help grow us as a nation. And what we should ask for is government to meet us halfway. So an example of this kind of pragmatism is we've had the apprenticeship levy now, which funds the apprenticeship system for just about a decade. A decade ago, I was running labour market policy for the CBI, the business organisation, and we said to them then, this levy disincentivises firms from offering apprentices. It makes it cheaper for them to offer fewer apprentices and more expensive for them to offer more. That's the opposite of what you want. And government did nothing and has done nothing for a decade, and we've seen apprenticeship numbers go down and down and down. So in reality, what we need here is a proper workforce plan from government, from politicians of all political stripes. And in delivering that, we have to deal with the realities that businesses face every day in how they spend their scarce available cash and developing staff, taking staff on and building their businesses. Because there's an element of lecture from Whitehall and Westminster about how employment should be that is coming from people who don't understand the realities of small business life out in the country.
And that in itself, I mean, if you are someone like the 95% plus number of businesses, you know this far better than I do, that have 7 or fewer employees, and you're the guy, you're the man or the woman who's the head of the business or the owner of the business, and you're trying to think, right, there's 6 of us, or there are 3 of us, or there's 2 of us, and we've got to get out and work all the time, and all this extra stuff is more work where I'm not plastering, I'm not being a hairdresser, I'm not plumbing, I'm not being an electrician or whatever. I'm not providing those services, I'm not making money, I'm getting more red tape and more things to look through and more regulation. And it's not my sense of this, as I have worked in the private sector, I do currently work in the private sector, but I've never run anything, I've never set up a business. My point is that these employers don't have the time to do that, never mind the inclination, never mind the money, which is scarce as well, and their time is precious too.
Well, and you've got to learn how to do it. First, my one advert for the night, join your trade association, people, because they can help you. But generally speaking, and my favourite example that I use in Whitehall all the time, Peter, is the average British business has someone go on maternity leave once a decade.
Yeah.
So you think about how often the rules have changed. That effectively means the average British business has to learn what the rules for maternity leave are every time it happens. And then you layer on everything else that's changed. Our Chief Standards Officer at the REC says that when they qualified as an employment lawyer, Butterworth's, the employment law guide, was about 3 inches thick, and now it's getting on to 8 or 9 inches thick. The corpus of employment law is enormous and increasingly difficult for most companies to deal with without then bringing in professional lawyers, and that's another cost. So there's something here about how we simplify this for businesses. And frankly, we think about not just whether each individual bit of legislation is good in and of itself, but what the whole burden of the employment law set feels like to your business owner in the Lake District, for instance.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil. I've learned a lot from that, as I always do when I talk to you. Neil Carberry, Chief Executive of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, thanks for joining us. Brian's been in touch and says, evening, Peter. After Nigel Farage's statement, the French have the cheek to say if the Navy brought the illegal immigrants back to France, it would be a violation of France's sovereignty. What about France allowing the boat people to violate ours? Brian says, good evening, Peter. It's about time the pot was stirred with Macron. The French are being paid millions to stop the boats. Does Macron not realise if he took back the illegal immigrants that the biggest deterrent, that is the biggest deterrent, because they would not travel to France in the first place if there's no chance of getting to the UK. Robin says, reform and restore must now put country before party, their egos aside, and work together. Also perhaps chatting with the Conservatives. Should they continue with their feud and division, then we will get a coalition of Labour, the Greens and perhaps the Lib Dems. Our country will be finished as we know it. Do Nigel and Rupert not understand they could end up being as despised as Starmer? Peter, could you remind us of the surname of your guest Ian? He made so much sense. Yes, of course, his surname is Acheson, depending on how you pronounce it. Acheson. He's written a great book called Screwed as well about the prison system. Thanks to Angela, who says it seems benefits claimants are the only ones who have time for sex toys. The rest of us workers are too knackered to use them. Great show, says Angela. We will be speaking to James Hodgkinson on sex toys, not literally. Stay with us.
$49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of messages about weight loss. I will come to those a little bit later on in the programme, but I want to read one from Gary now. He says, if my car moves so much as an inch, I get a real-time message on my phone telling me it's happened, so don't tell me that's not possible to reliably track offenders. To me, the solution to the lack of spare capacity in our prisons is simple. Take all the offenders who don't present a credible physical threat to the public, stick them in a prisoner of war-style camps, tag them, and then warn them that if about 1 foot outside that camp, they will be shot for trying to escape. Trust me, nobody is going to leave that camp until they have served their time, if they know what awaits them. I know you'll probably think that's barbaric, but you're part of the problem. The country is full of people who are not prepared to do what's necessary to sort out the mess that we've gotten ourselves into, so the downward spiral will just continue. Gary, thank you for that. I want to speak now to James Hodgkinson, who is a research associate with the Adam Smith Institute. He's been busy this evening moving furniture and indeed painting. I hope you weren't painting in your suit, James.
No. Took the suit off and yeah, so it's lovely to be here.
You do actually sometimes not wear a suit. You were wearing something else, I hope.
Yes, I was wearing something else.
Good. That's impressive. Well, let's talk about, speaking of prisons, let's talk about the 1,500 foreign criminals living in UK asylum accommodation. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, I wish I could say it surprised me, but sadly, what we've seen in the last 2 years, this doesn't surprise me one bit. I do think, of course, it's disgraceful. You would have thought anyone with a criminal record could at least be held in something of secure detention accommodation. Of course, the backlog that we've got in terms of deportations makes that very difficult. I've got two real issues with it. The first is the unfairness angle. We've got thousands of households up and down the country, probably tens of thousands, who are stuck on local authority housing waiting lists. We've also got a number of local authority managed housing portfolios which themselves are pretty unsafe if you look at the mould and the damp and all of the dangerous conditions which are associated with them. And so the idea that these illegal immigrant criminals are getting priority over British citizens on that basis, I think, is disgraceful. And then you've got the safety argument, because no one knows where these people are, no one knows who these people are. It's not like the government warn people where they're putting them. Simply, if you do know, you've found out on the grapevine from your community, and we've seen the danger of these sorts of people walking amongst us. If you look what happened in Epping, for example, with the rape case that we saw, that was perpetuated by a violent illegal immigrant. So these people do have capacity and potential to carry out really dreadful crimes. My bigger point, though, is that across all of these areas, it's local authorities that are providing these services, and we know that already government finance in local government is under immense pressure. Council tax is up in a lot of areas. Social care is in crisis. I speak a lot about Kent because I'm from Kent, and just a few months ago in Kent, we had our child social services downgraded because, in part, of the pressure being placed on them by illegal migrants. So we're in this remarkable situation at the moment where local residents in local areas are paying more, and they're getting far, far less for it because it's going on silly schemes like this.
I never ever thought I'd say this, but James Hodgkinson, let's talk sex toys. Benefits claimants have been offered discounts on holidays and sex toys. What's your thought on this?
Well, I'm probably going to surprise your listeners and say that my outrage is not with the actual schemes themselves. I'm a big believer in the fact that private enterprise are quite within their rights to go and offer whatever crazy discounts and crazy schemes they feel they need to offer.
70% off on Love Honey.
It is ridiculous.
David's been in touch and says, can't sex toys help you with weight loss? Asking for a friend. Lots of messages on that, but what do you think of the idea?
But what it belies is a broader crisis in welfare. So I speak a lot about PIP on this programme, and just again to underscore where we are on this, we're projected to spend double what we're spending now on PIP by 2030 to 2031, which isn't that far away. And it's not just disability benefits, because 1 in 8 16 to 24-year-olds are now not in employment, education or training. A large proportion of them will be on out-of-work benefits, and again will therefore be wrapped up in this cycle of freebies and state-sanctioned discounts and so on. But look, we've moved from a situation where these benefits, these carve-outs, maybe not sex toys, but other things, like, for example, free entry for attractions, were given to people who genuinely need it, given to people who have really profound issues, and that is not the case anymore. If the government wants to fix this genuine absurdity, which I sure hope they do, they need to start by, for example, making it so that mild anxiety, ADHD, depression don't get you access to PIP. I'd like to just stress the importance of work for young people, which I do all of the time, and cautiously welcome some of what Andy Burnham's doing there in terms of moving people from university into to practical skills.
We're actually going to talk about that in a second, and Michael Gove has been criticised by Lucy Powell. I expect you've seen this story today. She wrote an article in the Times where she said that his approach for a more academic side of things is a bad thing. You will have kind of gone through that system
yes.
as someone who's just recently left school, remarkably, given how mature you are. And we're in a situation where practical skills, had a message from someone saying his son is 19, wants to be a carpenter, can't get a job. There is a real problem here in getting people your age into work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I speak about it all the time. I have friends that I went to school with who you could tell weren't overtly academically minded. They tried their best at school. They came out with good grades. They're now going to university to do degrees that they either know that they're not going to use in future or don't know how they're going to use in the future. And so this idea that university is a land of milk and honey, it's a place for success, ubiquitously, I think, is wrong. We need to be quite frank, because at the moment we're setting people up for failure as well as success. And if we offer multiple routes, if we say, look, you're talented, you're creative, have a go at carpentry, have a go, for example, maybe at being something like a bricklayer. We need to build more houses, we need more bricklayers. That's how we equip people for success. But look, on the benefit carve-out story, I do acknowledge your concerns, and the roles of incentives that we see in the benefit system is something which is absolutely paramount to the way it works. People are rational actors. They do things based on the incentive structures that are there in front of them. But I want to offer some hope, because the public perception around benefits is moving, I think. If you look at polling now, and majority of the population say that benefits are either too generous or too easy to play, or are just, if you like, too easy to flout. And so we are moving to a situation where consumers feel this is unfair. And as we do that, as more consumers feel that way, these companies will start to change their ways. They will start to get rid of these carve-outs, and hopefully they'll return some of the savings to the ordinary consumers like you and I, for whom we don't want to subsidise anything.
James, thank you. That's James Hodgkinson, Research Associate at the Adam Smith Institute. What do you think of what he said? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're actually going to talk about education with an educational expert in just a minute about the really harsh criticism, actually, that Lucy Powell, the new Education Secretary, has made of Michael Gove. We've been talking a little bit about that, and many people getting in touch, mainly about boats, actually, and indeed weight loss. Gary says fatties here on the likes of Monjaro must be saving a fortune on food, so why can't they pay for their own fat jobs out of that money they're saving? Why do the rest of us have to pay for it? Tell us what you really think, Gary. And Stephen Millings in Belfast has been in touch again and says, I'd be lost without talk. I listen from 6 o'clock till 8. Love your show as usual. Hospital days are very long. Stephen has been in hospital for a long time. Stephen, I wish you well. Stephen, would you drop me an email? I know you've emailed me before, and I'd just quite like to have a more of a conversation with you, just even a short one, and then I can reply to it if you would do that. Lots to discuss. We will hear your views in the next hour as well. We'll also be paying tribute to Rod Liddle. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 9 o'clock. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Monday evening. It's the start of another big week. It may be the middle of the summer, but the politics and the news events keep coming, particularly when it comes to small boats. Also, Nigel Farage, big press conference this morning. He's been on the airwaves saying that he's yet to speak to Rupert Lowe about the fact that there could be some sort of understanding, merger, deal, whatever, between Restore Britain and Reform UK. We'll get the latest on that. We'll also talk about the fact that the Education Secretary, Lucy Powell, she was just appointed last week, or 2 weeks ago I should say, she has blamed Michael Gove's school reforms for Britain's youth worklessness crisis. We'll speak to an education expert about that in a second. We'll also be talking about the big political issues of the day with the Associate Political Editor of the New Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe, who's one of my favourite contributors, and reflecting on the life of Rod Liddle, the broadcaster and writer who was a total one-off, unknown to many of us, of course, in broadcasting and writing, but also because he contributed to this station quite a lot. Lots to discuss on all of this. I'd love to hear your views on it. There's plenty of time between now and 10 o'clock. You can get in touch in a number of ways. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can drop me a WhatsApp, a voice note or a text message, or give me a ring, all using the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. Let's hear what Nigel Farage said at that press conference this morning about a possible deal with Rupert Lowe's Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, said about a possible deal with Rupert Lowe, who is, of course, the leader of Restore Britain.
You could see a situation where Restore, without the hope of winning anything outside Great Yarmouth, I mean literally without a hope of winning a single seat in the country, could do us great harm. And I think online you will see a lot of Restore potential voters now beginning to worry about the impact that might have. So look, I'll finalise that by saying if it was the offer of a deal, it came in a very unusual way. I have responded to it potentially, with an open mind, as I would.
Nigel Farage speaking earlier today. Well, before that, Rupert Lowe put this video out.
So Nigel, my message is simple. If you are prepared to work together around serious policies, serious reform, and serious government, then so are we. Not because it's politically convenient for Restore Britain, not because it's personally easy, but millions and millions of British people deserve a patriotic government that puts our national interest before any personal differences that you and I may have.
Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore Britain. Well, since then, there have been some developments. Rupert Lowe accusing Nigel Farage of lying. In a post on Twitter, the Restore Britain leader wrote, "I do not want to make a private conversation public," but Farage has just done so at a national press conference. He stated that he said to me yesterday, "Shall we have a call?" Sadly, that is a lie. Yesterday at 10:30, Nigel messaged me saying the following three words: "Will call later. The evidence is below. I received no call." Senior Reform figures then went public to rubbish my offer. The offer remains open to Nigel and Reform, although outright lying about our private conversations does not help that. For Restore Britain, it will be a country before party, ahead of any personal differences or past disagreements we have. Well, Farage has responded to that, and he certainly is saying this evening in an interview he's done with our colleagues over at Times Radio, he's yet to speak to Rupert Lowe. He's also branded his accusations of having lied as extraordinary and paid tribute to Rod Liddle as well, which we will be doing later on in the programme, praising his prolific writing career. And earlier on, Farage said, I'm not closing the door on it, but I'm just slightly questioning what the deal is. So we will see what happens with all of that. Quite a lot of reaction. Keith in Nottingham says, being slightly cynical about Reform UK and the press conference, I genuinely want a Farage government in power, but was this a conference more about improving the opinion polls? Also, Burnham has pledged a closer relationship with the EU. Would that include rejoining the failing Schengen Agreement? Gary says Andy Burnham doesn't get it, does he? He talks about establishing safe routes for asylum seekers, but he is missing the point. Most of us are suffering from asylum seeker overload, especially with those who are coming from parts of the world with very different values from ours. We don't want them regardless of how they get there. We've had enough. Richard says, can't we simply tow them back and say, terribly sorry, but you appear to have missed a few? That wouldn't be unreasonable, surely. Pete in Lincoln says, under Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, an international convention under UN auspices that both the UK and France have signed up to, a country is responsible for the safety of boats or ships departing its ports. Clearly, these overloaded dinghies are not seaworthy, and the UK has every right to return them to France. By the way, using a Type 45 is a ridiculous notion and is only cited by the policy's detractors. However, the river-class ships and RIB's ribs would be ideal for the task, says Pete in Lincoln. Pamela says, Lou adamantly urged to put differences aside, yet he is poking Nigel by calling him a liar. When will he stop throwing his toys out of the pram? And I have said about the fact that sadly not every message is read out because we just don't have time, unfortunately, but we do welcome all your messages. This person says, you never read my messages. This is a total waste of money, but a good earner for you. Sadly, I see none of the revenue from the text messages, it must be said, but certainly I've now read out your message, which slightly disproves your point. But there we are. You haven't put a name on it, but you're very welcome to keep contributing. Right then, I want to talk about a row between Lucy Powell, who is the current Education Secretary, and she has suggested that a Conservative predecessor, a number of predecessors ago now actually, Michael Gove, that those reforms let young people down. She has blamed them for Britain's youth worklessness crisis. She says that she wants to look at overhauling the curriculum to focus less on academic subjects. In an article for The Times this morning, she wrote, 1 million, that's how many young people from the education system Michael Gove presided over who are now left outside education, not in employment and not in training. That's not a coincidence. It's a consequence. It's his legacy. He has pushed back against that and says that's not the case and that's an unfair criticism. And certainly, we did ask him on the programme this evening, sadly couldn't make it, but we're delighted that an even greater education expert is with us, and that is Laura McInerney, who's the co-founder of Teacher Tap, former editor of Schools Week. Laura, are you Team Powell or Team Gove? Who's right?
Evening, Peter. I mean, 10 years ago, I wrote about this issue with Michael Gove, and at the time looked at the evidence. And if you look at what he did, which was get rid of some of the technical and vocational qualifications for those who were 14 to 16, all the evidence, if you look across loads of countries, is that your youth unemployment will rise a bit, but you get better social mobility. So this is never cost-free. However, as much as I'd love to just come on here then and say I was right and he was wrong and Lucy Powell is right, there is a complicating factor here, which is that Wales and Scotland did not do the same as what England did, and yet they also have rising numbers of young people who are not in education, employment and training. So it's really hard to just pin this on the curriculum, even though there is some evidence that you will end up with probably worse youth unemployment, worse youth unemployment if you don't have vocational and technical qualifications in at 14.
When you look at the number of people who are NEETs, when you look at the employment crisis, when you look at the fact that someone messaged us earlier on saying his son's a carpenter, he wants to be an apprentice carpenter, 19, he can't get anybody to take him on for apprenticeships, he's learning the skills. There's a real crisis here, and I just wonder how much you think what people are learning in schools is directly related to that, or indeed not learning in schools.
Well, it's interesting because I expect in the case of the carpenter, he might be learning the skills. The issue is getting the employer to take him on. And this is the problem. We're sort of rolling a ball down the hill to teachers in schools of 14-year-olds when really a lot of the issue here is sitting within employment. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Some does come down to the changes in the minimum wage, the national insurance increase, no doubt, but also just a lot of entry-level jobs are disappearing. Both the fact that you've got a minimum wage which is quite high, so you need people to be as productive as that minimum wage is, but also AI and the move within the service industry, for example, to screens rather than having people do their first jobs behind a till on a Saturday. It is just making that entry for young people much more difficult. Now, that is where Andy Burnham and Lucy Powell, their argument that you've got to work with employers is important, but I wish they would sort of focus on that rather than the schools, because I'm not sure it's anything that the schools are doing wrong. It's more about things upstream.
What do you make of this review by Professor Becky Francis, who recommends that teenagers sit fewer GCSEs? The government considering that. What should they consider? What should they do, in your opinion?
I mean, there are an enormous amount of exams that young people take in this very small number of academic subjects. And so the argument is you probably don't need 20 to 25 of those. You could take some of the time off. I think that's very sensible. But that's quite different than saying, which potentially Labour are putting back on the table, at 14, you wouldn't have to take any of those academic qualifications, or you would only have to take a few of those. That would be very, very different. And it would be quite different than even what Becky Francis's curriculum review is due to say. So we'll have to wait and see whether actually this is just really about more work experience, getting more employers around the table, which I think everybody would be in favour of, or actually do they want to do something more dramatic for 14-year-olds.
You were a teacher. You must have seen a lot of 14-year-olds who just thought, look, I'm learning geography or French or physics, and this is just absolutely no relevance to what I want to do with my life. And so it proved a few years later, when you maybe they left school or you learned what they were maybe doing as a job, and it had no relevance to that. At what stage, in your opinion, do you think we should say, right, this is an academic person who should probably be on the pathway to university. This is a person who maybe doesn't like academia quite as much and is more practical or could have some technical skills. Maybe we should put them in the pathway there. What's the right age? What's the right time? Or is there a right time?
Well, I don't think we do have to make that decision. Actually, young people are able to make those decisions already. Our national curriculum's really broad. It's got things in it like drama and dance. It's got art in it, as well as science and business studies. There's all kinds of choices you can make at 14. And I've rarely seen a situation where in a small enough class, with good enough teachers and good enough pastoral support, that you can't get students to do almost any subject, frankly. At 16, there are already lots and lots of options, BTECs, T-levels, various different types of apprenticeships and other qualifications. So we don't have to, as a state, make that decision. The challenge at 14 is that you've only got a certain number of hours, you've only got a certain number of buildings, and you've only got a certain number of teachers. And I actually taught on a lot of the qualifications that Labour brought in last time, the diplomas. One of the challenges when you try and put vocational qualifications, job-related qualifications into schools, is you don't have people trained as teachers to do this. So what you end up with is not as high quality teaching. The class sizes are exactly as they were before, and you don't end up with that rich experience, which I think would help those students who are otherwise struggling.
The National Grid is pledging £5 million to fund training and employment support for 5,000 young people over the next 5 years. It's become one of the first major employers to back Prime Minister Andy Burnham's recent overhaul of technical education. I'm sure you welcome that, as I expect we all do. I just wonder, if you're a small business and you want someone coming out of school, the kind of skills you're going to be looking for are changing, aren't there, especially when it comes to the things you mentioned, the changing workplace, AI and so on.
Yes, and the fact that a lot more people are remote and working from home. So it's much more difficult to get that experience of somebody being alongside you. But really, when you speak with employers a lot of the time, what they'll talk about is the paperwork that's involved, the regulations that are involved, getting insurance to have young people on your site, if you're a construction site, for example, is almost impossible now. I was talking to someone the other day who runs alternative provision. They had students who previously were able to do, for example, hairdressing. Now the insurance won't let them do that under a certain age. So there are lots of issues here that can be dealt with, but they probably do need to be dealt with via employers. And it's probably easier to do that for 16 to 18-year-olds. Once you've got 14 to 16-year-olds involved, I think sticking them on a construction site is going to be a bit too challenging.
You've done it before on my programmes, but you mentioned hairdresser there. Can you tell the hairdresser story? I love the hairdresser story. I love this story.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how life-changing these kinds of qualifications that sometimes get dismissed can be, which is that I had a student who was doing very well. She had top grades, but had applied to do hairdressing at college, and the school said they weren't sure this was the right choice for someone who could go on and do A-levels, so would I speak to her? And when I asked her why she wanted to do hairdressing, she said that she'd come to the country with very little money, but that with nothing more than water and hot air, she could make people feel like $1 million. And if you can do that, why wouldn't you want to spend your life doing that? And I think it's a brilliant reason. And so I didn't bother to try and talk her out of it. I told her to carry on.
You did exactly the right thing. Laura, thank you as always. That's Laura McInerney there, who is the co-founder of Teacher Tap. It's a fantastic app that asks teachers what they think about things. She's also a former editor of Schools Week and a former teacher. So lots in that. What do you think of what she said there? 0344 499 1000. Many people getting in touch. What an inspiration James Hodgkinson is, says Catherine in Cardiff. Do please continue to give him airtime. Should be very proud if he were my son. I do forever have a Super Peter myself. Fabulous name. It is a fabulous name, Catherine, so thank you. I got a letter today, says Becca, that DLA is ending for my daughter, so she has to go over to PIP. She's 16, but treating her like an adult. When does 16 become an adult? Another person says, why are we constantly subjected to this fantasy that the migrant boats can be forced back and screw the French? It isn't going to happen. Detention and deportation to get to their homelands or third countries is the only way. The Greeks were able to push boats back, sometimes violently. Same thing on the Hungarian border, but we won't and can't do this. Let's at least be realistic. Brian says, regarding the foreign criminals, why not house them in tents on a secure campsite, or is that against their human rights? Stephen says, the first time I've ever received this message. It's hot and still. Is the grid running out of power now the night has fallen? Hi, this is the National Grid. Hot weather can affect the network, so power cuts may be more common than usual. Prepare now so you're not ready if this happens. And then there's a website. If you rely on electricity for medical reasons or need extra support, we're here to help. And then there's more information there. Interesting there. Ernie says, Rupert telling Nigel not to have any field conservatives in his cabinet is showing he's just another in a long line of hypocritical politicians. He was a conservative up to 1993, but left because they weren't right-wing enough. Just like the conservatives that moved to reform, we want right-wing leaning politicians in reform because the left-wing woke politicians and the conservatives are full of them now. They're ruining this country. It's time for real change and for politicians to listen to the majority of British people, not the minority left who are ruining the country. Alex, on weight, lots of people getting in touch on weight. I was told I had to lose weight by a consultant, but recovering from a broken leg and not being able to exercise properly. I've learned a lot about them and do not see it as a long-term solution. The doctors say if you can make a lifestyle changes with jabs, you can come off them and it can be beneficial. From what I gather, if you just use the jab and don't make positive lifestyle changes, you will just put the weight back on. It's the same as being on a diet. If you stop eating stuff, then you lose weight, and then you suddenly start eating, you know, cakes and a load of bread, or, you know, tonics tea cakes or whatever, you're going to put it back on. Alex says, I would rather not be putting a peptide found in lizards into myself to control my eating, but doctors say the safest thing is to do that at the moment. Well done on losing nearly a stone, Peter, naturally. That's amazing. Keep it up. Well, I think it's probably just the easy bit, sadly, but we're not quite at the stone level yet, but I am losing a bit, although no one's noticed because there's quite a lot of me. Dee in Chesterfield says, I am concerned about the effects on probation officers with the proposed early release programme. My little brother was seriously overworked as a probation officer and collapsed at work. He suffered temporary blindness and leg paralysis. I can't help thinking it was a contributing factor to him dying for cancer 2 years ago. He was 58, says Dee in Chesterfield. Dee, I'm so sorry. That is a really rough thing that happened. Thank you for paying tribute to him, and clearly he was very, very dedicated to his work. Lots to discuss on all these matters. Please do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls after the break. Stay with us.
$49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Steve has been in touch with a voice note on boats.
My thoughts about migrant crisis is that if any government gets in that is truly dedicated to stopping it, the very first thing they'll have to do is declare an emergency. That way they can overcome all the objections and blockages that people will try and put in the way of somebody who wants to actually fix this crisis. And the second thing I was going to say is regarding restore and reform. Yes, I think they should join forces because we can be sure that the forces against them are going to all club together as much as they can in order to stop them.
Really interesting points there, Stephen. Thank you. And on the second point, I think as we stand at the moment on the 3rd of August, I think there won't be a snap election. Could be wrong, but I think it's unlikely. I think Andy Burnham will be Prime Minister for the next 3 years. I think there'll be a very fractious general election, and the most likely outcome, I think, right now, obviously 3 years can change a lot of things, is a hung parliament. And the question after that is, who can you do a deal with? And if the left do a deal, then the left are in power. If the right do a deal, then the right are in power, depending on the numbers. But I do think that if the right gets its act together now, well then the next 3 years could be easier for them. Not exactly earth-shattering analysis there, but there we are. Alex says, why would the French want to stop people? They want the immigrants gone as much as possible. All you need to do is take incentives away and we'll have tangible results, but we need out of the ECHR to do it. If nothing, waiting for them when they get there, they will stop coming. Look forward to hearing a forecast about the hot weather from a sensible meteorologist. Oh, I forgot this was earlier. I forgot to ask Joe about the weather. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P. Hi Joanna. I think they should take the migrants back to France by ferry with, you know, we paid you for stopping the migrants. Here are a few you missed. Graham says, I've been listening to you all talking about the boats in the channel. There's always a solution to the problem, and there's only a problem if you make it a problem. Get the King's Marines and the SBS in there, and believe me, those boats will be stopped. Dalton from Middlesbrough says, I think Farage's stance on Lowe's offer is respectable. Mr Lowe should now respond swiftly and put the country before his own personal differences. With certain ex-Tory ministers, we should unite as one and become a force that can't be reckoned with. Joanna says, Rupert Lowe in his video I find creepy. Something is off, maybe the mood music. Farage didn't say how long it would be before he would do the call. Farage is very busy and Rupert has nothing to do but wait by the phone. Trev in Middleton says, for the last few years, people on Talk have been screaming for Starmer to be replaced. Now he is gone. Everyone wants to shoot. Now everyone has wanted to shoot him down. He hasn't started the job properly. And Burnham hasn't started the job properly. Farage is not the answer. Mick says 1,500 foreign criminals living in taxpayer-funded housing. Solution, house them in refugees. Welcome activists. Tanya says immigration is reform's one policy. They have to get it right. I doubt they've put the detail out today without looking at what they can and can't do. Those poo-pooing it are defeatist. What else can we do? At least they're trying to protect the borders more than I can say for any other party. Let's go to Josie in Leicester, who has some thoughts on Restore Britain. Josie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Yeah, I want to point out 2 or 3 things with you tonight. I'm of a British Asian, and I want this message to go to Restore because I don't think they quite understand how my mother came to England. My mother came to England because the the British Raj ruled the Nairobi in Kenya, and basically she was given a British passport to come to England. So we were already British, right? Let that sink in to Restore voters. And no, thank you. We do not want them in reform because we don't want you, right? And there was a lady on earlier on Kevin's show, and she was like, yeah, but I think she was part of Pink Ladies, and I have all the respect in the world for that lady because I totally respect her, stopping the rape gangs, all of that. I respect her so much. But she was like, no, well, Nigel hasn't got back. We don't need to. We've got a brilliant party. We've got so much ahead. And if Restore really does respect the country before the party, then you know what? Don't bring demands to reform. You join, right, with your heart felt, and you join us so you know we're all on the same page together. We know what's causing it.
But you're saying, Josie, you're saying you want to keep Restore Britain activists out of Reform UK. I just wonder if it meant
No,
that...
what I'm saying to you,
Okay.
what they're trying to say is that they want all brown and black people out of this country. But what
I don't think everybody in Restore Britain is saying that. I know some people in Restore Britain have said that, but not everybody.
Some of them. Doesn't matter, right? But the way they're doing it is the way they're messaging on Twitter and everything. And don't forget, Elon Musk went to USA and he failed. So obviously he's going to fail, Rupert Lowe. I mean, so what? What's he reaching out for? With a heartfelt cuddle message, just like.
But if it meant Reform could have a victory, if it meant that you wouldn't,
I
understand
that.
Yeah.
Peter.
Would you bite the bullet and just do it?
Well, I'm not going to do it with a load of thugs, right? I'm doing it for, honestly, Reform are doing it for every British people in this country that knows what's going wrong. So, and I want to go on to housing in a minute.
We don't have a load of time, Josie, so maybe you could make your housing point now.
Okay, right. So with the housing, what I want to know, under the Boris wave, the people who come here on student family visas, can you tell me, you need to research this because I can't get my head around this, why are they buying all our new houses that have been built? Because they are in our area.
Okay, well, it's certainly a point to ponder. I mean, those homes should certainly be on the open market anyway. Josie, thanks for your points. I'd like to have a longer conversation on another occasion, but Phil in Preston is just on the line waiting, so perhaps we can do that again sometime, Josie. Phil has some points on the boats. I'd like to get him on the air. What would you like to say, Phil?
Yeah, you probably know, but the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands, if any immigrants go there, they get nothing at all.
Yeah, that's correct.
They don't get money.
That's correct.
They don't get money. So why don't they do that here? Are we frightened or something?
I mean, I just think it's a very good example that they have on the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man, because I mean, it's difficult enough for anybody to move there. You've got to prove that you've got money, you've got to prove that you've got a job, and those tighter rules seem to be quite sensible.
Yeah, but why can't they do that here?
Yeah, very good point, Phil. Thank you. Let's go to Elaine in Derbyshire. I understand your son has done an apprenticeship. Is that correct, Elaine?
Yeah, he done an engineering apprenticeship. What I wanted to say to you is, thing is with Andy Burnham, I do agree that more technical education needs to be like a veiled of 14 to 16-year-olds. But what I'd like you to ask a Labour person is that they've just put in the schools bill that nobody can teach a child unless they're qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But are they going to get plumbers and electricians and nursery nurses into schools to teach these young people?
Yeah, it's a very,
There's
very good
strange
point.
rules. If they're saying they're going to ferry 200 to 300 14 to 16-year-olds to and from college, and I'm sure the colleges are going to have something to say to that, because even though colleges do have some courses for 14 to 16-year-olds, they're usually for disabled youngsters or youngsters who can't go to school for whatever reason, and they're very small units. They're not designed for a whole local authority, 200 to 300 per school.
Yes.
So this is my issue. So I understand Andy Burnham's point, but I'd like you to ask a Labour minister that you've changed the rules that only qualified teachers can teach a young person. And Catherine Burble-Singh did raise this.
Yeah.
She used the example of music teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Because of their speciality, you don't really need to be a teacher. You need to be proficient in the subject.
Yeah. Well, listen, Elaine, I do a bit of teaching at a university. I don't have a teaching qualification. I two parents.
Need one.
Yeah, two parents who were teachers.
To be a plumber, and you're not going to pull those plumbers off their work site. And tell them, and now you need to go and get a teaching qualification.
Yeah, exactly.
This is ridiculous.
And it's going to make it more difficult. Just before you go, Elaine, how is your son? Is he doing okay with his engineering? What's happening?
He did a aeronautical engineering apprenticeship. He is 26 now.
Mm-hmm.
He's a engineer. He
Great.
works for an aeronautical company. He saved 10,000
I know a big one in Derbyshire, which is, shall we say, the gold standard, if not the Rolls Royce of aeronautical engineers.
He's in a bed sit. He's fine. He's able to afford to pay his rent. It's a great thing. I'm just worried that because they were so ideological, they wanted to, the academies.
Yes.
They've kind of shot themselves in the foot. Unless they repeal this law, I don't understand how they're going to be able to deliver this, quite frankly.
Listen, thank you. Really appreciate that. That's Elaine in Derbyshire there. Roger's been in touch and says students need to become active, not sedentary, on phones and consoles in their spare time. I've had a few apprentices. All two lasted a few months. The last one had done a year in college on a joinery course. He could not cut a piece of CLS for a light fitting. I could not believe it. I don't really know what CLS is, but I do know that I couldn't cut it. I think college for site-based skills is not required, and skills should be granted on-site if the applicant is willing to work. The government should fund the first year, as these lads nowadays are hard work. But I have an eager 15-year-old girl who has a hyper personality. She's brilliant. However, at weekends when HSE isn't about, she is not academic and really is wasting her time at school. Her maths isn't that good, but she's learned more on site with me than at school. It's a shame I couldn't train her up now to be an electrician. She would fly through the course and be qualified at 19, a potential to earn up to 80 grand a year with the graft. What is CLS? Can we look that up? To see what that is. I expect it's a piece of wood for a light fitting or something like that. Someone says Josie is spot on. Hopefully I have a longer conversation with her later. I've read that one out. Dave in Litchfield says, well done on the weight loss. I was 20 stone, cut out processed food, cooked fresh, and started walking and lost 6 stone in 5 months. That's superb, Dave. Well done. The job is like having a machine that keeps cutting people and stocking up on plasters. David in Canterbury says, Restore Britain's critics seem not to understand that those who really are extreme right and nasty will inevitably support Rupert Lowe's party, just as the extreme right in Germany and France will inevitably support the AfD and the National Rally, because these parties are the most right-wing of the ones available. This does not mean that the three parties are extreme. If Restore Britain did not exist, the nasty elements of the right would support Reform UK instead, says David. And Tony says, get the lady who was the hairdresser story on your show. That's a wonderful story. I hope she was a success. I've absolutely no doubt she was. I think that was quite a long time ago. But Laura McInerney, who I've known for many years, told me that story years ago, and I am delighted to be able to share it with you. CLS in Electrical Engineering and Grid Connections. CLS stands for Customer Limitation Scheme, also known as an Export or Import Limitation Scheme. It's a controlled system used to manage power flow at a property boundary so it does not exceed agreed limits. Is it? Cutting CLS, like turning off the power, basically. Okay, all right, now I understand. Do you know what? I actually changed a light bulb yesterday. Yes, really. I am very practical, I'll have you know, although I couldn't put up a picture frame. I got someone else, got a man in to do that. Right then, we're going to talk to Rachel Cunliffe, the Associate Political Editor of the New Statesman, on all the politics, including Restore and Reform. Keep your calls coming in. We'll get as many of them as we can on the show between now and 10. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then, let's talk about all these issues to do with Restore and Reform. Rachel Cunliffe, one of my favourite guests, cat person, and Associate Political Editor at the New Statesman, is with me. Rachel, how likely is it, with this war of words, the fact that there are recriminations already? Nigel Farage has been on our sister station, Times Radio, saying that he's yet to speak to Rupert Lowe. He's branded Rupert Lowe's accusations of Farage having lied as extraordinary. I mean, do you think the two can do a deal?
I mean, it all disintegrated quite quickly, didn't it?
Yes.
I think the key word in this saga is egos. Both of these individuals are now leading their own parties. Rupert Lowe obviously was in Reform, and one of his reasons for not being in Reform is that Nigel Farage, he basically runs a very tight ship. What Nigel Farage says goes, and Rupert Lowe had his own ideas, and we can see the result of that now. Now, there are strong reasons for both parties to consider some kind of formal or informal arrangement. Reform seem to be in a quite difficult position at the moment. They're not succeeding in capitalising on more of the Conservative vote than they were able to last year, and they do seem to be sort of losing voters on their right flank to Restore. If you look at the Manchester mayoral election, Restore got almost 9%, which is absolutely incredible for a party that kind of barely exists. So you can see the benefits there. On Restore's side, 9% is great for a challenger party. It's not great for a party that actually wants to win elections. But I think as long as there are these two egos and there's so much bad blood between the two of them, even if they want broadly the same things, and we can talk in a moment about whether they do want the same things, but even if they did, there's just so much going on the personality front.
Thanks for covering that. I mean, I think we've talked quite a lot during this programme about what they want and don't want, so we'll maybe just move on to another story that I'm keen to talk about, which is about technical education, not least in the context of the fact that Lucy Powell has taken on Michael Gove and essentially blamed him for Britain's youth worklessness crisis, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm not sure this completely adds up for a number of reasons. I mean, if you read the sort of Alan Milburn report into NEETs, not in education, employment or training, there are a vast range of issues. It's everything from mental health to lack of training and education, yes, but also lack of opportunities, lack of junior entry-level roles in a number of fields, be that, you know, university graduates or people who leave school with little in the way of qualifications. The other reason to be sceptical of it is that Michael Gove's education reforms they weren't enacted across the whole of the UK, but the NEETs crisis isn't just in the Michael Gove areas. So there are reasons there to be sceptical. That said, there is a genuine point here that our education system does fail the quarter to a third of young people who don't thrive with an academic setting, and we don't really offer much to them. And I think that's partly a skills and training in schools issue. I think it's also partly an educational issue. I think until a minister says that they are going to send their child into technical education and not try and encourage them to go to university, we're still going to have this kind of mismatch of expectations and status. And we also have people who don't understand business. There are only two people who've worked in the cabinet who've worked in business. One was Andy Burnham. He worked for a publisher for a few months. And secondly, the other one was Louise Haig. And the less said about how she left Aviva, I think is probably the best. Another big story, of course, huge story actually, was that there was a plan a few years ago, I'm sure you read this in the Mail on Sunday, to get another cat at Downing Street alongside Larry. That plan didn't go ahead. I just wonder what you make of that. Well, we are going to need a replacement Larry at some point.
I don't like this talk, Rachel. I don't like these. I don't want to contemplate a post-Larry world.
No, but I think the more cats you have at Downing Street, the better. And whether they can catch the mice or not is kind of irrelevant. Just having the cat there prevents the rodent infestation. So the more cats, the better. But they've got a dog now, possibly a dog moving down from Manchester.
No, he's not. No, he's not. He's not moving down from Manchester. As I exclusively revealed last week, he's not moving down from Manchester. Definitely not. So there we are. But yes,
Cat paradise.
Well, exactly. If you want more, there's a great paperback coming out actually on the 1st of September. It has some quite a big endorsement from quite a big figure in political journalism. It's actually Rachel Cunliffe who said it's a really good book. So there we are.
It is a really good book. If you want to know behind the scenes of politics through the eyes of our furry friends, definitely give it a read.
Thank you very much. You're too kind. Rachel Cunliffe there, Associate Political Editor of the New Statesman. Now, I have an apology to make. CLS has nothing to do with cutting power. It is a reference to 2x4 timber. Thank you to everybody who's messaged in about that, including Daniel and Pearlie, who says CLS is a grade of timber suitable for structural applications such as framing and stud walls. It stands for a Canadian Lumber Standard. And Ian and Hinton has also made that point. Thank you. It's for stud walls. And Roger says this is a type of timber used for stud work. So thank you to everybody who has done that, who has sent those in. I appreciate that. And definitely the wooden spoon made of the Canadian Lumber Standard to producer James, who got it completely wrong, but saying that I didn't know what it was either, which just shows that, you know, I'm an arts graduate, get me out of here. I did change a light bulb yesterday, which is about the height of my powers. We're going to talk in just a second about Rod Liddle. We'll take your calls as well too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
$49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Rod Liddle has very sadly died. He was 66. He was a newspaper columnist, a broadcaster, no stranger to these airwaves. He contributed to a lot of different programmes on here and also with our sister station, Times Radio, where he had a weekly programme. In fact, he went up against me on Saturdays and I have a very good friend who said, I'm afraid I just have to listen to Rod first and you afterwards on catch-up. His children have paid tribute to their father. They described him as a guide on how to live an extraordinary life. He certainly had an extraordinary life. He was the editor of the Today programme for the BBC. He left that after he was there was controversy after he talked about the Countryside Alliance. He was never a stranger to controversy. In fact, he revelled in it and he was very good. I mean, some people are controversial for the sake of it, but Rod literally just didn't like the kind of prevailing wisdom on so many things, and he challenged that. He thought in a very, very critical way. The chief executive of News UK, which is the company that owns both Times Radio and our station, and also the Times, the Sunday Times and the Sun, said everyone at News UK is deeply shocked and saddened to learn of the sudden death of Rod Liddle. That's Rebecca Brooks, our chief executive. Rod was an inimitable journalistic force, brilliant, provocative, immensely talented, whose sharp wit and uncompromising voice graced our pages and airwaves for decades. Rod will be greatly missed by all his friends and colleagues at News, as well as by many readers, listeners and viewers. Our thoughts and sincerest condolences are with his family and loved ones. Loads of tributes, including from Kemi Badenoch, who said, just heartbreaking to hear the news of Rod Liddle. I don't have the words to express how sad this is for journalism, for his readers, and most of all, his friends and family. He had missed his column, and hearing his voice on the radio, thought he was on a break. Rest in peace, Rod. You're very much missed. Robert Jenrick said Rod Liddle said the unsayable truth years before anyone else would come close. Rest in peace. piece. Rupert Lowe said, it's awful news that Rod Liddle, a towering intellect and friend, has died. My thoughts are with his loved ones. The broadcaster Andrew Neil, shocked to learn that Rod Liddle has died. Terrible news. Deepest condolences to family and friends. I knew Rod Liddle a little bit. I knew him to say hello to. I knew his writing far better than I knew him, and he was a brilliant writer, not least for The Spectator magazine. A very funny writer. I didn't agree with every single thing he wrote. I agreed with most of it, and he certainly always challenged and opened my mind to all sorts of things that I hadn't thought of previously. Interestingly, Rosie Duffield, who is the former Labour MP, now an independent, has tweeted as well, we just lost someone I would never in a million years have been expected to be friends with, or probably even to have made peace with. A larger-than-life Marmite character, controversial, sometimes infuriating, but terribly witty, sharp and fun, and capable of extreme kindness, empathy and charm, especially in private. Gone far too soon. Desperately sad news. And Rosie Duffield is not necessarily the kind of person you would expect to pay tribute to Rod Liddle with such warm words. Dominic Dyer, the animal rights campaigner, disagreed with Rod Liddle on many things, yet they were friends, and Dominic is with me now. Dominic, I'm very sorry to hear about Rod Liddle. How will you remember him?
Yeah, he was quite a remarkable man in many ways. Very intelligent, very well-read, very, sophisticated in many ways in putting his opinions together, even though he could be provocative, he could be controversial, but he was, not a lightweight in any sense. If you look at his career, he went from sort of being a local journalist to going into the BBC and then becoming editor of the Today programme, which is very much the establishment flagship of the BBC. But he brought his own style to that. And like you said, he fell out of favour there because the Telegraph basically came after him because of the criticism he made of the Countryside Alliance over fox hunting. And that's where I got to know Rod, because he had a very, very strong passion for animals and animal rights. And that was sort of throughout his career, no matter where he was, left or right politically, he cared deeply about animals, wrote about animals an awful lot in his columns, followed my work very closely, and often got me involved in various stories that he was running, or got me on the radio and got me talking about what I was doing and encouraged me. And that to me was really important. There were very few people that are willing to do that in the media, and he often really put himself out for that as well.
Yes, he was a very surprising character in many ways. He had all sorts of opinions that just didn't fit into the standard kind of left and right and the way that we would expect people. He was often surprising in what he said, what he did, and he was kind of merciless when he was puncturing people, when he was talking about the ludicrous nature of so much of the lanyard class and so many different bits of society. I wonder whether you enjoyed his broadcasting more, his writing more, or just his company.
I think it was a combination of all things. I remember some of the stories I worked on with him. You might remember the issue about Geronimo the alpaca, the story. That was all down to Rod, because I'd come across this story about this particular lady that brought this alpaca in from New Zealand and was fighting with DEFRA that wanted to effectively put it to sleep because they claimed it had TB, and she said it'd been tested, it didn't. Rod loved the story. He said it had everything in it. It was about big government trying to sort of bully a woman, this animal, the whole TB system being completely faulty in terms of testing. And he got it on page 3 of The Sun. And by the weekend, it was on the front page of the Times and the Telegraph, and it was being mentioned in Cabinet, and it was all
I remember this, yeah.
It was a huge story, and that was very much down to Rod. And then, that August of 2021 was a big time for me, because after the story of Geronimo, which I was very much part of, we got involved in the rescue of people and animals out of Afghanistan. With the Nowzad situation, which became a massive, massive story, which Rod followed and was very much supportive of what we were trying to do. But there was more to it than that, because, the event happened, we got the people and the animals out of the country. It became a big scandal in terms of what Boris Johnson did or didn't do in terms of supporting that. And I was in a situation by the following February where the press was zooming in on Johnson. There was a select committee inquiry. There was lots of discussions going on with the Foreign Secretary, National Security Advisor, the Home Secretary about who knew what. And the Prime Minister was basically trying to deny everything. And I remember having a conversation with Rod. He rang me and he said, listen, I know you're doing all these interviews and you're obviously under a lot of pressure. He goes, can I give you some advice? And I really appreciate it, because this was really tough. I've helped get some animals and people out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
4 months later, this could bring down a Prime Minister. But the one thing I always said is I didn't want to hide what I'd done. I was very proud of what we achieved, but I think Johnson needed to own up to his involvement. And then people could question as to whether his decisions were the right ones or not. What I didn't like was his denials. And Rod understood that. And he said, listen, I know you've got information and stuff, so I'm going to work this through with the Sunday Times and Caroline Wheeler, the political editor, and we'll get this story in a way that you want it to be, so you can get your story out there. And he helped me do that. And in turn, what we had was leaks from senior civil servants in Whitehall that backed up what I said. And in the end, the story did come out very much the way I wanted it to,
yes,
a full inquiry report and everything. But it was very much down to his wife's advice at the time, and I really appreciated that. You know, when I stood for Parliament in 2024 as a Liberal Democrat, he wrote a column in The Sun supporting me. You know, I don't support Liberal Democrats, he said. But
Amazing.
I do support Dominic Dyer because he's standing up for wildlife.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that. And then one of the last interviews I did with him on Times Radio, and to be fair, I think Times Radio was wonderful, you know, that last year.
Yes.
Because I think people saw another side of Rod.
They did,
you know,
yes.
A more sophisticated, you know, broad interest in politics and culture and arts and music. It was a wonderful program that people tuned into on Saturday mornings who maybe didn't even know who he was and never knew about the past controversy. Just loved the program. And, you know, and he said to me, listen, I want to do something on badgers. You know, you've been following the story on badger culling for years. Let's get you on. Let's do an in-depth piece. You can tell, you know, I'll give you 20, 25 minutes. We can talk about the whole story about badgers. And I went on and did that. And it was probably the most in-depth interview I did with someone that really understood the issues about all the incompetence, negligence and deceit in government, Conservative, Labour governments, coalition governments, and the poor badgers having paid the price. And it was a wonderful interview. And to me, it summed him up. He was, you know, like that. And I think he really deeply cared about it. So, yeah, I shed some tears today. I missed him. I knew he was ill. Like a lot of us were trying to contact him to see if he was going to be able to respond. Didn't hear anything. But it's really, really sad to hear his death today.
Dominic, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think it's important to reflect as well the broad range of friends and people he helped, like Dominic, who, you know, agreed on some things and not others, and that didn't matter. And that spirit of disagreeing without being disagreeable, definitely something that Rod Liddle embodied. He had iconic contributions to certain programmes, including Question Time. Let's have a quick look at a contribution that Rod Liddle made in 2018.
I really wish that the people who were taken in by that and agreed with that would look to the left away from the podium and see the rabble with their Palestinian flags and their lanyards sponsored by Hamas, would look to the raft of hypocrites, the raft of hypocrites on the Labour front bench, Thornbury, Abbott, Chakrabarti, all of whom don't want you to send your kids to private school or to selective schools, but do so for their kids. And for Corbyn and McDonnell, who have given support and succour to every possible hostile, violent, anti-democratic, terrorist regime or organisation they can. IRA, Hamas, Hezbollah, Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela. If you want people like that running your country, vote for Corbyn.
Tony says, I love it when Rod was on Talk. He was funny, cutting and straight to the point. His political journey is fascinating. Joanna in Salisbury said, I'm really sad Rod Liddle died today. I believe it's a year tomorrow since James Whale died. Some people will always be missed. Is it a year tomorrow? Flippin' heck. God, that's gone so incredibly quickly. My goodness. Gosh. James Whale and Rod Liddle both very, very much missed, my word. And thank you to everybody else who's been in touch. We'll maybe come back to a few messages in a second, but I just want to go to the phones because Julie in Chester is on the line. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Julie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say? Julie, are you with us? Julie in Chester.
Hello?
Hi there. Yeah, go on ahead. Go on ahead.
Just listening to that gentleman, what a loss. You know, what
yes.
So sad. I didn't, I've never seen him on your programme, but what a loss. Anyway.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, I'm just ringing in regards to the education system, the caller you had on before in regards to, vocational skills.
Yes.
Absolutely spot on. You know, my son went through that. He was diagnosed with ADHD through a school doctor, not through a form you do yourself. And I begged for him to get him into vocational skills college, but he was deemed he wasn't naughty enough to, they only took so many out the year that were naughty.
Yes.
Not naughty, but,
How old is he now, Julie?
Oh, he's 23 and he's on the bins and he loves it.
That's his job and he likes it? He's happy with that?
He's got ADHD, he's medicated, and he's on the bins.
Brilliant.
But he had a disability advisor, and they were absolutely rubbish. I don't know what we were paying taxes for them.
Okay.
But
he's got a fulfilling job. He's making a contribution. He's happy in his work.
I loved it. It is finding the right job, but I think our education system completely needs to change. It's outdated. The government, the hypocrisy, aren't they? If they're paying all these kids for ADHD, well, why not changing the education system then?
It's a very good point. They're looking at some...
Paying them, why aren't we just putting that money back into the education system and putting more courses available?
Julie, really good point. And listen, thank you.
Also,
sorry, go on ahead.
Sorry, no, I'm really passionate about it.
Yeah, of course.
I also work in the services with PIP payment.
Yes.
Some of these government ministers that live in London need to come on council estates and need to come and work in the services that we're dealing with, because they're almost, basically, as an adult, if you want to, my friend's a nurse, a band 6 nurse, she's also a manager in the healthcare service. She's had to be, educated, go to university to be an ADHD prescriber, because it is that bad. She said, I've got 60-year-olds coming into me, because it's not for that, it's for the money.
Yeah, very interesting stuff, Julie. Listen, every good wish to you and your son as well. Thank you for that. Lorraine's been in touch and said approximately 25 years ago I collaborated with our local college to provide hospitality vocational training with our 14 to 16 disaffected students. Everyone told me it would fail, and apart from my brilliant head, we had very little support. Despite this, we were amazingly successful. The students experienced a hospitality setup that we in school financially just could not replicate. The students religiously attended lessons before and after school, so it did not have a negative impact on schooling. We ran a restaurant and an evening. The skills that these students enabled them to enter the employment market. Many of them have worked their way up the management ladder. I still see some within the hospitality settings. I'm really proud of what they achieved. Well done, Lorraine. That is absolutely superb. And Leslie says, am I the only one who thinks this country is rudderless? Freeing criminals, housing illegals, now sex toys for those on benefits. Petrie Hoskins is with me. Hello.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I wasn't expecting you to talk about sex toys.
Well, I mean, I'm full of surprises. Tell me about what's coming up in your programme.
Right, what's coming up? Friday, obviously every Friday now, Donald Trump says there's a peace deal.
Yes.
And then we get to Monday and Iran says...
Is there a peace deal?
Is there a peace deal? So I just wonder, does he know that we all know that he does